Gentlemen, what did your girlfriend's dad do to establish dominance? I found out my father-in-law was a high-ranking official for the Secret Service in Poland during the Soviet era. He doesn't have to do anything more to terrify me. I married her, though. Best decision I've ever made. She's much prettier than I am. We're 16, talking out in front of her house at 8 p.m., very innocently. He comes out and starts mowing the lawn, making eye contact the whole time. To be fair, it's nice and cool at 8 p.m., and mowing in the midday heat is a pain. Plus, mowing in the morning sucks due to the grass being wet from dew. My ex-wife's father, actually a pretty cool guy, one year at Christmas, I was trying to open a package that my nephew had gotten, and my father-in-law said, "Just use your pocket knife." I said, "Sorry, I don't carry a pocket knife. I'll go get one from the kitchen." He said, "What kind of man doesn't carry a pocket knife?" I sat there for a minute, trying to think of a response, feeling pretty low. He started laughing and said, "Sorry, my wife's dad asked me that one time and I've been waiting to use it on you." My ex-wife and I are still on pretty decent terms. That gentleman passed away recently. It was a really sad thing, knowing that he was gone. He introduced himself, told me about his profession, that of a surgeon. Then during the conversation, he slipped in the line, "Oh, and if you get hurt, I can give you personalized care, or finish you off. It all depends on how you treat my daughter." Oh, and he had some crazy eyes too, always wide open. He's blind. He asked if he could feel my face to get an idea of what I looked like. It was awkward, but my girlfriend Alice was smiling brightly, so I felt a little proud. Then he stepped back, shrugged his shoulders and said, "You can do better, Alice." He's my father-in-law now and one of the funniest and smartest men I've ever known. My fiancée was in a horrible relationship before we dated. Her dad met me with joy after I genuinely smiled and shook his hand when we met. Now we golf, fish, and hunt together when we can. My dad passed away last year, and hanging out with her father is always a pleasure. All my girlfriend's dad had to do was stand up. I'm 5'6" and he's 6'1". My sympathies, Short King. That sort of thing shouldn't matter too much, but I say this knowing that if the man who sired my girlfriend was a full 7 inches taller than me, I would be intimidated. He sat down on the couch next to me shirtless and just wearing long underwear and said, "Let's play a game called See How Uncomfortable We Can Make Trevor." My name isn't even Trevor, by the way. Then he proceeded to take me up to his bedroom and tried to coerce me into smoking Mary J and doing fungi, even though I told him I'd never done any substances, never wanted to do them, and was expecting to be tested as I was trying to get into the military. Eventually he backed off, but he was always pretty weird. We got quite drunk the first night we met. I took his side over hers in a debate they were having. He grabbed my face and kissed me on the lips. Years later, walking her down the aisle, he said to me, "She's your problem now." In short, I have an awesome father-in-law. The best part is, a year later, we didn't live on the same continent as her parents, hence the gap, we went back and I met her sister for the first time. Drunken night again, girlfriend and her sister were arguing who was dad's favorite, and their dad shouted, "Out of everyone here, my name is my favorite." So I got up, walked over, grabbed him by the face, and kissed him on the lips again. He actually didn't do anything himself to terrify me, but my girlfriend did it for him. She told me all about how her grandfather, his father, was a legitimate lumberjack and how he, her dad, was pretty much one as well. He chopped wood for fun, and at one point his arms were so big that he had to cut the sleeves off his flannel shirts. He also used to bow hunt, camp for days, and works out a lot. He's the manliest man I personally know, which is a stark contrast to me. He's a really nice guy and has only made me feel slightly uncomfortable with his sarcasm. Wait a minute, wait. Is he single? Yeah, he's on the dating app Tinder. He was never around. It actually freaked me the F out. He was like a ninja. I was always checking in the shadows, waiting to see if he'd spring out. My girlfriend's older brother and her dad cornered me at a party, and her older brother said if I ever did anything to upset her, he'd suck the manhood right off me. He's not gay. The party was for his baby's baptism. Told me to eat more the second time we had dinner together. Real hard guy, right? The first time I met him, I gave him a carton of Mao's favorite brand of cigarettes. He's Chinese and a smoker. We can't communicate much in English or Chinese, but I'm pretty sure he likes me. Her mother, on the other hand, has done everything short of putting a 12 gauge in my mouth and making me promise I'm not wasting her daughter's time, including pressuring me to buy a car, even though I live like a 15-minute walk from my office and public transport is as fast as driving. Shot me, point blank, with a Nerf weapon. No warning, just at dinner I was having with their family. All he said was, "You try any funny business, you'll get the or nothing." Background: I'd recently started dating my girlfriend and had met her dad one time. I'd left a bottle of whiskey at my girlfriend's house. She was out of town for the weekend, so I asked if I could sneak in and grab it. I came in and yelled to see if anyone was home, and no one replied. I went upstairs to grab my bottle, and in bursts her dad with his hands raised, asking who I was and saying he was a judo champion. He then realized who I was, and we said an awkward goodbye. He pulled me into the laundry room and made me help him fix the washing machine. It was odd, but after he realized that I had a general grasp of how to use tools, he seemed to lighten up. Also, asking him to help me replace the radiator in my first car was a plus. Love that man to death. Too bad his daughter's a psychopath. "Yeah, I'm breaking up with you, but I'd like to negotiate joint custody of your dad." This guy clammed up, basically acted as if I wasn't there, and if I did talk to him, I got single-word answers. This is an actual conversation when I was stuck in a car with him. "So, what do you do?" "Sales." "Been doing that a long time?" "Yes." "How many years?" 30. "Are you retiring soon?" "Yep." "What are you planning to do when you retire?" "Florida." "Where in Florida?" "West." "So like Tampa?" "Yep." My girlfriend got a text the next day from him saying that I'm a great guy and he's happy she's dating me. I was 17 at the time and was really into his 16-year-old daughter, so he sat me down at his kitchen table for what I thought would be a talk. Instead, he pulls out a length of rope and demonstrates step by step how to tie a proper noose for hanging someone. Dated a girl back in high school who took me to her grandparents for a family reunion type meal. Sometime after the dinner, her grandfather took me outside to talk and we started walking towards his workshop. So he opens the door and suddenly I'm staring down the barrel of a cannon. Not a model, not a toy, a fully functioning Civil War cannon surrounded by all manner of historical weaponry. Muskets, rifles, swords, bayonets, battle axes, and even a suit of armor. You name it, the old boy collected it. Needless to say, I knew right then and there that Gramps didn't F around and I probably shouldn't be doing anything to really annoy his granddaughter. I once came to a girl's house to pick her up for a date in high school, and her father answered the door and said, "Come in." So I followed him inside to discover the dining room table was covered in disassembled firearms, and he casually sat back down, resumed oiling and assembling everything, looked up and said, "So, what are you kids up to tonight?" This is as far as a dad can go towards opening the door with a loaded weapon without actually, doing that. Loving the friendly tone that he set as well. He broke my rear window with a cricket bat for taking his daughter on an amazing date that made her happy. She was supposed to have an arranged marriage. He's from Bangladesh. Shook my hand real firm and asked, "Hello, are you effing my daughter in your apartment?" No introduction, wouldn't let go without an answer. I'm really tall and he's a short, stocky wrestler. 14 years later, we're still together. It was suggested that I put my answer here, so I will. I believe she interrupted with, "Dad," and we kept a firm grip. We locked eyes, silenced for a few seconds, and I said, "Pleased to meet you, sir." He said nothing. I knew that he knew. We both knew. He shows me that he knows how to run and tune large industrial equipment all the time, and I don't mind because it's actually interesting as F. Watching a movie with my girlfriend. I'm wearing my Alabama hoodie and he saw it. We were in the basement and she got a text from him which was a picture of a bed with all Alabama covers, pillows, and stuff with the caption, "When you're ready for a romantic night with your cousin." I took the hoodie off and left in shame after that. He made me a bet. If I could catch 3 footballs while his daughter was covering me, I'd have his respect. Not the strangest bet I've made, but whatever. I ran 3 different routes for each one. Caught the first 2. Last one, I didn't know this about my girlfriend, but she's a huge Deion Sanders fan. Ball goes up, she catches it, and in the process elbows me in the face and gives me a black eye. Why am I walking away from this convinced she let you catch the first 2 and she's done this to multiple men? He told me he worked for the Ministry of Defense, that his job was very high security clearance and potentially dangerous. Basically portrayed himself as kind of a big deal spy and he'd published some papers on counter-terror methods, so at least it kind of tied together with his academic interests. I never really found out what his actual job was or if he was bullcrapping me. But I do know that his daughter didn't know much more than I did and she was unable to legally declare his income for the purposes of student finance assessments, which does kind of support the idea that his salary isn't supposed to be a matter of public record. My father-in-law left her when she was a child. It was a real power play on his part, in my opinion. Back in 2009, my then-girlfriend's dad joined us at a college party and walked up to me wordlessly, grabbed my drink and chugged it in its entirety before handing the can back to me. He's a funny guy who was fond of me. It was mostly an ironic gesture of dominance. Kind of a joke? Joke's on him though, that drink was a bona fide, cafe-laden 22-ounce Four Loko. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Literally none of the girls I dated had dads, either by death or divorce. I wonder what that says about me. A dad cleaned a 9mm in front of me. That said, I think he already knew that my dad was a cop and he figured I thought weapons were cool, which was true. I truly thought he was trying to relate to me. In hindsight, I guess not. He was never a jerk, always neutral and friendly. Korean war vet and nuclear engineer. He had mad tech knowledge of his hobbies. When I was 18, I went over to my girlfriend's house for dinner, in rural Montana, to meet her parents for the first time. My girlfriend knocks on the door, her dad answered the door with a 12-gauge, looks me dead in the eye and says, "So, you're the guy who's been effing my daughter." Girlfriend shakes her head and walks into the house, leaving me on the porch with her dad. After about 4 seconds of me trying not to pee myself, he laughed and told me he had been waiting 18 years to do that. I guess it had been a running joke in the family that he was going to meet whatever boy she brought home at the door with a shotty, and I was the first one she had brought back. I actually found it pretty funny once my heart rate settled to below heart attack levels. They're a pretty liberal family of artists who really seem to respect their children's rights to do whatever with dating, and I ended up living in a teepee in their backyard for a summer. It's still joked about 20 years later. While his daughter and I are no longer together, we dated for about 4 years, I'm still very close with her and her family and stop by whenever I'm in the area. Haven't even exchanged names yet. The guy puts his finger on my chest, I look down and of course he flips it up into my face. Laughs so hard. I wasn't expecting it, but that's just who this guy is. The first time I ever went to my girlfriend's house, her dad busted open the board game, Ticket to Ride, and proceeded to utterly destroy me. As he stole the last possible way for me to get from New York to LA, he looked me in the eye. He knew what he was doing. 5 years later, I've still never beaten him. He showed me pictures and told stories of his family and Chairman Mao together. Pretty sure they could have made me disappear. This is what my dad did when my sister's boyfriend came home for the first time. Just sitting at the table, sharpening the kitchen's knives. I still don't know if it was a coincidence. My dad says it was, but my mum and sister make a really good point. He had never sharpened knives for the kitchen before. The story of my dad waiting for him sharpening knives has been told around the whole school for a couple of years. First time sleeping at their house. At breakfast in the morning, come up the stairs and he's cooking bacon in red tighty-whities. He sat on the couch and watched house remodeling shows on HGTV while eating bags of candy. My dad told my boyfriend that he reminds him of the song Rosalita by Bruce Springsteen. It's about a no-good, dirt-poor musician sleeping with the guy's daughter and convincing her to sneak out of the house. See, that one wouldn't have worked on me because I'm an uncultured yob who can't name any songs by their title and who also doesn't really listen to any of them deeply enough to understand their meaning. So that's going to go over my head, Dad. My father-in-law held some state title for boxing state champ in his home state back in the day. The first time we drove over to see him, he was drunk and had a huge cut across the bridge of his nose. Apparently, he had beat the crap out of 3 20-something-year-old bullies the night before when they decided to jump him at the bar. His 70-something-year-old dad was mugged in his own home one time. My father-in-law found the guy who did it, followed him inside his house and broke his knees and elbows. He then proceeded to beat the crap out of the guy to the point of brain damage. In his words, if they can't talk, they can't identify you. The guy is chill as F every time I'm around and thanks me every time I see him for getting his daughter out of the hellhole they lived in. But I know for a fact if I ever break her heart, he'd fricking bury me. If I ever leave, it'll have to be leaving the country. That said, he's actually a super cool guy who's never given me trouble for a second. He'll call me up out of the blue and thank me for taking care of his daughter. Because he knows if she wasn't with me, she'd probably have ended up with one of the buttholes she'd been dating around there. My ex-father-in-law never did anything to really establish dominance. He shook my hand and looked at me and asked how I was doing. About 7 months later, when she was my girlfriend, we went and told him and her mother that she was pregnant, but we'd already started saving extra money and had a plan for when the baby was born. This was in 2002. He once again shook my hand and thanked me for actually being a real man. Eventually, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and we moved in with them so we could keep a better eye on him. I ended up with not only another father figure like my grandfather, but a best friend. We did everything together and had a lot of fun. We'd pick on each other so much it could easily get out of hand, much to the rolling of eyes of our respective wives. He went missing a couple of times, going for a walk and getting turned around, and then went for a drive and got lost. I was terrified but kept my composure and didn't stop looking until we found him hours later. He was a stereotypical Texan with lots of weapons, cowboy boots, and hats, but with a heart the size of Texas itself to match. As a fun fact, when his daughter, my wife, ended up cheating on me, which led to separation and divorce, she thought it was okay to bring the new guy around a couple of months after our daughter and I moved back near my family. My old father-in-law excused himself and came back with one of his weapons and simply proclaimed, "You're not Paul," and the guy actually peed himself. He told me about it later on the phone, cracking up, and he said, "I'm not as far gone as they think sometimes." And he told me that I'll forever be his son. I miss that old Texan cowboy. I flew overseas to meet my wife's family and ask for her hand in marriage. Made reservations at one of the fancier restaurants in town and asked him to meet me there for a talk. I should add that I was unemployed and completely broke. He pulls up in a BMW, tires screeching, and tells me to get in. I protest that we have reservations and he says to forget about them. He takes me to a really simple coffee shop, says that I don't need to impress him with fancy stuff. I tell him that I love his daughter and will always make sure that she's happy. He just looks at me for a long time, not saying anything, and finally says, "I don't know you, but I know my daughter and she's really smart. So many guys wanted to marry her and she turned them down. If she sees something in you, then I'm all for it." We shook hands and then we drove to the supermarket so I could help him haul a crap ton of groceries. My wife and I have now been married for 15 years, and he's always been a complete gent to us. Even though I showed up in his city completely broke and jobless, lived under his roof and ate his food, he never once made me feel that he was doing me some kind of favor, or that I was anyone but a valued member of his family. And this despite the fact that he has a nasty temper and never holds his tongue with anyone else. I worked my butt off and got back on my feet, and my wife made a big leap in her career as well, and eventually we moved back to the States. He continues to be my ideal of what a real man should be. I hope to deal with my own daughter's husband as honorably as he's done with me. My father just happened to be cleaning his weapons and trying out his bore sight when I brought my boyfriend home for the first time. A table full of rifles and shotties. My boyfriend's reaction was, "Oh, neat," and they talked about the weapons for an hour. They went without me to a blacksmithing festival recently. I think all I did was bring home a friend for my dad. I live in Langley, Virginia. The other thing that lives in Langley is the CIA. A girl I asked out in my freshman year of high school had her dad drive us to the mall. No biggie, I'm a fairly confident person and there wasn't much of a plan to fool around at the mall. All part of his plan, I'm sure. Anyway, we get into his pickup truck and I'm in the back. The guy's wearing a navy dress blue uniform. I see he's a petty officer. I know insignia because I was a Sea Cadet. I was idly curious and wanted to make small talk so the guy likes me, so I check out his insignia when he turns around and talks to me. Red chevrons and a trident. The guy was a frickin' Navy SEAL. Never mentioned it, but you could tell he knew that I knew. Subtle yet effective. I give this boyfriend's scaring method an A+. Yeah, the whole FBI or CIA agent father is one thing, but you still never know if that person has handled a weapon in conflict in their life or if they're some kind of agent or HR administrator for that organization. This guy was about as dangerous as a man can be. I would be fascinated to know if he managed any conversation more than a squeak after that. My wife, or girlfriend at the time, is Japanese, so we flew to Japan so that I could meet her dad and ask for her hand in marriage. At dinner, he pulled out the whiskey and beer. Turned out to be a drinking contest where I had to match him drink for drink. The problem is that I'm 6 feet tall, have 25 pounds on his butt, and I'm Mexican-American. Insert stereotypes here. 3 hours later, he was blotto passed out while I was at the mini-mart buying a 6-pack to drink on my walk back to the hotel. That night, I became a family legend. She had 2 mums. It was quite awkward when they both tried establishing dominance. Gay dude here, but I'm quite a bit more masculine than my fiancé, so I'm going to count myself in for this question. I think it's also a good story for its contrast with all the weapon-toting, axe-wielding knife sharpeners in this group. The first time I met my then-boyfriend's parents, his dad invited us along to the opera with them. I'm from a blue-collar family and had virtually zero clue what was going on and could hardly understand anything. It was a pretty mind-boggling experience. Then he took us out for a $400 dinner and insisted I have a really good couple of scotches after. I was like, damn, I hope your son doesn't expect to keep living like this because I'm poor as F in comparison. He didn't. I don't play that silly game, neither did she, and thankfully, neither did he. It was, you seem like a nice guy and I trust my daughter's judgment about you. None of the nonsense of scaring the daughter's boyfriend that crappy dads like to do. What is one secret your parents can never know? I was brought up in a pretty religious home. My family had me in theatre, choir, youth group, and all kinds of other extracurricular activities to keep me out of trouble, so they trusted me pretty well. One night, I was about 15, my boyfriend at the time had come over to watch movies. The stipulation was that we could lay on the bed and watch the movie, but the door had to be open. After a while, my mum came in to check on us and everything was fine, so she thanked my boyfriend for being a gentleman and shut the door on her way out. Immediately, as if the door shut had triggered some teenage hormone overload, we started making out and fooling around. He slid his hand up my shirt for a bit, but finally having some privacy, I soon directed his hand to my nether bits. Yay, first, not self-stimulated, climax. We never got caught, which was considered a major triumph, and we found ways after that to hook up without my parents knowing. It wasn't until a few months later at my youth's purity ball, yes, we signed pledges and wore rings to signify our abstinence for God and marriage, that my dad delivered this humiliating speech. He told the congregation he was proud of the strong lady I had become, that regardless of having a boyfriend, I stood up to teen peer pressure and hormones, and that he witnessed me deflect an attempt at immoral behavior while watching movies with my boyfriend one night. Apparently the blinds had been open and my bed faced them from in the house. He happened to be walking in from the garage and caught a peek at me removing my boyfriend's hand from under my shirt. I was mortified. The secret he must never know? The night I had my first climax? He thought I deflected my boyfriend from touching me under there, when in reality I was actually redirecting him much further south. It was me who superglued the fridge door shut. I just blamed it on my brother. This is nowhere near as serious as some of the things in this thread, but it's easily my favorite. As a younger brother, you frickin' butthole. As an older brother, I probably would have done the exact same thing, and yes, it probably would have worked. After my sister died, I locked myself in her room and went through everything alone before her friends or my parents went through her stuff to pack it away or give it to her friends. I found nude pictures, empty bottles of alcohol, and a letter she had wrote but I guess never gave to her then boyfriend, telling him the story of how she had been taken advantage of as a younger teenager. I threw everything like that out but kept the letter. It's been 12 years now, and I just found the letter again as I was packing up to make room for a baby. I can't bring myself to throw it away. Well, good on you for being that filter. I shudder to think about people going through my crap after I die and finding all my skeletons. Is there an official term for this? Should this be a thing? I need to designate someone to do this, otherwise I'll ruin a lot of memories of me. A lot of people have suggested skin flick buddy. I'd get punched in the face if I went to my best friend and said, Larry, we've known each other for a long darn time, let's be skin flick buddies. Surely we can come up with a better term that requires little to no explanation. I suggest the term Halo Maker, because they make sure you're remembered as an angel. I was about 10 and my dad had just painted the boiler room door orange in our basement. My younger brother and I were pushing each other around on a skateboard in the basement and my dad warned us, "Don't you dare hit this door with your skateboard." 15 minutes later and I'm picking my brother up from the ground and looking at a hole in my dad's orange door caused by said skateboard. Definitely not telling Dad. Instead, I grab a piece of orange construction paper and a glue stick to patch the hole. It matched surprisingly well. 27 years later, that construction paper is still holding strong, and I have never heard a word about it from my pop. Later, well, it looks like I just blew my cover just for you people. I texted my mum and asked her to take a photo of the door. It looks like the years have faded it. This happened in my freshman year of high school. One of my friends got a hold of some green herb, and I haven't tried it before, so we have the stupid idea to smoke it. He came along with some other friends of mine. The original plan was go to the forest near my house and to smoke it, but it was cold, so we didn't want to. One of us wanted to smoke it on my porch, but I disagreed. I forget how, but we came up with the dumb idea to hotbox in my bathroom. Keep in mind, my parents were going to be home from work in an hour, and if they found out, my life would be over. We quickly made a crappy bong out of a Gatorade bottle, then removed everything from my bathroom. We lit up the herb and smoked for like 10 minutes. Once we were done, we quickly cleaned the stuff up and emptied a whole Axe bottle in the bathroom. My friends, being high as F, left. I went back upstairs to check the bathroom and it smelled like flat-out Mary J. I tried to use every possible thing to get the smell out, but it didn't work. I called my parents, they have the same job, and they said they were 15 minutes away. I knew I was effed. Now keep in mind my parents were extremely strict, and if they caught me, this would be over. This is when I thought the dumbest thing any sane human would think. Burn my bathroom down. So I ended up lighting some towels on fire and trying my hardest to burn the sink area. It ended up catching on fire, but it was slow. I quickly called 911 and 3 minutes later I see fire trucks outside of my house. They took care of the fire and my parents came home shocked. Half of my bathroom was charred and the door knocked down. Fire department said it was probably an electrical current from the outlet that burned a towel. I stayed up that night thinking about how dumb I was and what I just did. To this day, my parents don't know. When you guys went to Hawaii, I put Milo, the cat, down. He was sick, in incredible pain, couldn't eat or drink, couldn't even move to get to the litter box. When you left on vacation, he was too weak to even yowl in pain anymore. I couldn't stand to see that cat in so much pain and so afraid, so I did the only thing I could do to help him: end his life humanely. My parents were 100% against putting down a pet regardless of how much it's suffering, so they'd go beyond mad if they knew this. Well done, commenter. Letting an animal live on in pain like this is terrible, no matter how much it hurts us to see them go. You did the right thing. One time, I dropped an entire roll of toilet paper into the bowl when trying to change it. I didn't want them to know I ruined an entire roll, so I hid it in my closet, and over the course of a few weeks, I would rip away pieces and throw them away. Since some people seem to be assuming my parents were horrible and I was frightened, that's definitely not the case. I was just a dumb kid that was embarrassed about dropping a whole roll in the toilet. That last story was the most innocent response in this thread, and it reminds me of something I did. Once when I was 7 or so, I was playing before bed and somehow frayed the cord of my bedside lamp. So when my mum came in, I told her, and she said, "Okay, we'll fix it/replace the cord in the morning, just leave it unplugged." I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and forgot that my lamp was broken, so I plugged it back in to be able to see where I was going, and a couple of sparks popped out of the frayed section. Terrified, I quickly unplugged it and ran to the bathroom to get a cup of water and then poured it onto the section of the carpet where the sparks had landed. I must have sat there for half an hour, worried that I was going to start a fire, and I wanted to be sure nothing had happened. I remember sleeping terribly that night, anxious that our house was going to burn down, and going over the evacuation plan we learned how to make in school. My sister and I were reading through my mum's old high school yearbook, and we kept seeing everyone's sign saying something along the lines of, "Congrats, you and X are perfect together." X is not our dad, but we'd never heard X's name mentioned before. After a little more digging, we found out she had married X right out of high school, divorced, and then married our father. Neither of us really cared, but it was still a huge shock she hadn't told us now that we're both in our mid-20s. My dad always tells me I was so whipped by my girlfriend back in high school, and the example he always uses is, "That one time she told me to change out of my sweatshirt." What really happened is that she pointed out the huge white stain that she left on my sweatshirt the night before, and I figured I should change it to avoid awkwardness on our day out with my family. Yeah, I gave my ex hand fun times once on the backseat of my mum's car while his mum was driving. He arrived on one of my sweatshirts, and the next day at school I see my mum wearing it. She was a substitute teacher. Huge white stain on the back of it. Didn't know what to do. My dad thinks I lost my virginity earlier than I actually did. He thought he'd walked in on me post-fun times with my girlfriend at the time, but we'd actually just been play fighting, and the moment he walked in was the moment she decided to put the strap from her top back on her shoulder. After that, I found out my dad's told half the family about this, and despite me trying to tell him that I hadn't done anything, he claimed to have believed me, but didn't. So he'll never know when I actually did because he believes a lie. To answer this particular topic, how to use a computer, apparently. Yes, my mother-in-law is the same way. She keeps getting viruses and asking us to fix it, even though we live 19 hours away, or to buy her a new one. She recently started seeing a guy who's a gamer and has suddenly decided she wants us to buy her a gaming PC, even though the most advanced game she plays is Candy Crush. Mother-in-law calls.
Help! The antivirus says the file I downloaded is a virus and to delete it. What do I do?
You delete it.
But how do I make the antivirus pop-up go away?
You click the little X.
But you said never to touch it.
Just close it and delete the file.
No, but you said if I touch it, I'll get viruses. I'm just going to get another computer.
I'm sorry for hijacking this topic for old people can't use computers thread, but it made me laugh and I'm not sure that these posts are elsewhere. Blame the people who wrote them. That one of my childhood friends and I used to play with each other's willies. It was fun and we liked it. I'm a married, straight guy, but this information would shorten their lifespan undoubtedly. I'm pretty sure the statute of limitations are up on this one, so why not? I was a junior in high school and had some friends into LAN parties who were seniors, but I couldn't really join them because my family was pretty poor and neither of them could afford a computer for me to use at that time. So one day, my older friends give me one of their older PCs, a Pentium 3, with a couple of parts missing, RAM, hard drive, that I could build out for myself. Now, about 15 years later, it's turned out to be a great jumping-off point because now I'm a successful system administrator and love working in the IT field. And I owe it in many ways to that first computer I learned to build back up from scratch and make my own. Only, they didn't give me that computer, we stole it from the high school. Sorry, not sorry. I totaled my first car when I was 16. They knew about that. They came to pick me up and talked to the police officer while I was moving things from my car to theirs. What they didn't know about was the liter of vodka in my trunk, which I quickly and quietly speed-walked to my parents' truck. Neither the cop nor my parents knew a thing. I very nearly crapped my pants. Disclaimer, I did not drink and drive. The trunk was just the only place my parents never checked, and I happened to be a rowdy teenager. I can never tell mine that my number one goal as a parent is to handle relationship issues differently than they did. They went through an extremely messy divorce when I was 8, and my only memory of them together is them screaming at each other, and my sister and I hiding in our rooms. Then it was 10+ years of them talking crap about each other to us, putting us in the middle of all their arguments, and giving us a huge guilt trip whenever they felt like we were spending more time with the other one than with them. It's been 20 years now, and my mum will still talk crap about my dad and stepmom every once in a while, despite me asking her over and over to stop. I'm happily married, but if I were to ever get divorced, I will never put my daughter in the middle of arguments or speak badly about her father to her, or make her feel guilty about having a relationship with him. It's the number one thing I learned from my parents, and I think they would be devastated to realize the true effect it's had on me. I was taken advantage of as a child by a babysitter 10 years older than I was. My parents were trying to help her out because she was having issues in her abusive home. Her father was then tossed in jail. This went on, from what I can remember, for at least 2 years. I was 4 to 5 years old. I didn't tell anyone until I started dating at 14. My parents do not know because A, they were trying to help her and I felt sorry for her. But for a preschooler's mind, it didn't work that way. By the time I felt I could say something, so much time had passed that all I could see happening was me hurting my parents, making them blame themselves. Why do that? I see this person from time to time in passing at the supermarket. We have mutual acquaintances. People bring her up. That bothers me. I don't care about what's happening in her life. I think she was going through some messed up crap and passed it on. I feel sorry for her. When I see her, I look in the eye and stand strong, almost to say, you know what you did, and I am not broken because of it. When I was in elementary school, I was at Target with my mum and sister. At the checkout counter, I saw these cinnamon-flavored Tic Tacs, and I had to have them because I hadn't fully developed the whole want or need function in my brain. I knew my mum wouldn't buy them for me, so I grabbed them, sneakily, and put them in my pocket, sneakily. I felt pretty guilty the whole way home and didn't make eye contact with anyone in case they could read my mind. As soon as I was inside the safety of my home, I made my way upstairs, sneakily, and opened my hot goods. They were awful. Easily my least favorite Tic Tac. I ended up throwing them in the garbage can outside, sneakily, to avoid any suspicion. This is my shame and I carry it alone, except now with theoretically thousands of people. I wonder how common it is for kids to have nicked candy from stores growing up. I know I did once, and I felt terrible about it afterwards as well. When I was about 10, I discovered the ability to jerk in my gherkin. Oh, those were great times, tugging in the shower. I soon discovered the vast world of the internet and its dark places. One day, I decided to start going at it in my room. Well, it was about time to finish up and had nowhere to shoot. So, I splooged on the floor and rubbed it in. No big deal, right? Our carpet was an off-white, so when I rubbed it in, it would just disappear. I did this for 10 years, people. I had no idea how that stuff smelled. I guess neither did my parents. One day, they started to notice the stench. They chalked it up to my dog always laying in my room and my friends having really stanky feet. As did I. One day, I got curious after learning splooge glows under a black light. Borrowed my brother's black light, went to my room, closed the door, flipped the switch, and holy crap, the carpet in my room was brighter than the morning sun. I noped the frick out of there with that black light and buried that memory to this day. 4 years later, my girlfriend starts going on about how splooge smells like a dirty wet dog, and feet after it's dry, and it clicks. My room stank of splooge for years. That's a dirty secret I'll take to the grave. I signed a lease for an apartment in Florida before I came back home from my internship down at Disney. I came back home and never went back down. I paid for it for a year. My roommates wouldn't let me have someone else sublease. It was a horrible situation and I screwed up. I don't need to hear from my parents how stupid and young I was. Oy. When I was about 11 or 12, I was going through my pyromaniac stage. One Saturday, I decided I would grab a steel can and fill it with gasoline and head to the woods. Now, this wasn't just your typical old can of SpaghettiOs, it was a 1-gallon bulk-sized can, filled to the brim. I took it to the woods and decided it would be cool to just light it on fire and see what would happen. I lit it and it caught like I expected and kept burning inside the can. After about 15 minutes, I got bored and went to try and put it out. In the process, I knocked the can over, spreading gasoline all over the forest floor, and it erupted in a ball of flame. I quickly ran back to my house to get water and come running back with about 5 gallons. By this point, the fire had spread tremendously and my efforts were useless. I decided my best bet would be to run inside and play video games. Luckily, this spot in the woods was pretty good ways away from my parents' house, so it didn't draw my parents' attention immediately. After about an hour or so, the entire fire department is on the scene battling the 3 to 4 acres of forest fire that is roaring. There was a road that runs behind my house, and the fire basically engulfed all of the forest separating my parents' house and the road. This road is notorious for substance dealers and crystal houses. While the firefighters are trying to battle the flames, it's discovered that the house closest to the fire is actually a rather large lab house, and the cops show up and a huge bust goes down. Naturally, the fire was blamed on them, and my parents just accepted that. It's now 20 years later, and my parents still do not know, nor will they ever know. In conclusion, set fire to 3 to 4 acres of woods, Crystal House got blamed, parents will never know. My sister, stepbrother and I are all adults now, ranging from mid-20s to early 30s. I was the oldest, so I had already moved out by the time my sister was a teenager. We were all out to dinner with our parents recently, exchanging funny stories back and forth, and then this came up. Stepbrother, to my sister, I guess we're all old enough for this story now. So, remember how you would call me to see if our parents were awake yet? Sister, we are not old enough for that story. That's where it ended, but I assume my sister was sneaking out at night and calling my stepbrother in the morning to see if it was safe to sneak back in, and despite being in her late 20s now, still doesn't want my parents to know about it. I was sure you were going to say they were sleeping with each other. I felt absolutely the same as that last commenter I just quoted, and I'm relieved to be proven wrong. Maybe it's a filthy mind thing. I spent the night in jail for possession of Mary J. 5 years ago. Not a big deal really, but it would kill my mum if she found out I'd been in a jail cell. That I was the one that blew up the toilet. To this day, my stepdad thinks someone broke into my house, smashed the toilet, and left. I'm not that close to my parents, but as an adult, I'm a lot mellower and recognize the fact that they're nice people who did their best. So there's nothing that would be catastrophic for me if they found out, but I'd be a little glum about the unnecessary trauma it had put them through if they ever found out how many people I've slept with, how many of them were dudes, or the sheer quantity of illegal substances I did at one point. That party I threw in high school when you guys were out of town for the weekend that you found out about due to my snitch butt neighbors. It wasn't just some guys drinking beer and playing poker, it was actually an illegal substance-fueled swingers party. And yes, your bed was used. When we were staying at a friend's place on holiday, my significant other and I accidentally broke her guest bed. Like one of the legs gave way and the whole thing collapsed. It was an ultra-cheap metal frame, and significant other found a meat cleaver, and we banged the bejesus out of that bed to get it back into shape, to no avail. I had to ring my friend and confess. Due to the conservative nature of my parents and their firm beliefs, we have allowed them to believe that we are chaste and good and would never actually have sex. Ew, gross. We've never lied, but we've certainly been guilty of omission. We're getting married this year, and my friend with the broken bed is a bridesmaid and is working on her speech.
Teens, what is something important that you feel your parents should learn? Do not insist on comparing me to my friends. They do not act the same way in front of you as they might in their own home, and you have no clue how they act when they're at home with their own parents. Done up pretty strong, yeah. I may have heard that once or twice in my teen years. Just because one of my friends is a girl doesn't mean you have to constantly bring her up. What's the story behind that? Do they give you the whole, oh, why don't you take your friend Stephanie to prom? Stephanie's a nice girl. Privacy. My grandmother will come into my room while I'm sleeping just to look through my window above my head to see what the neighbors are doing. She looks above my head to peep at what I'm doing on my phone. She gets mad at me when I don't tell her an answer to a personal question she asks me. She is also untrustworthy and will lie to make a story more interesting, so I can't tell her anything in fear she will spread a rumor that isn't true about me. I once told her how the gym teacher passed away from cancer, and she proceeded to call her friend and tell her my gym teacher dropped dead in front of us at the gym and cancer spilled out of her. If cancer could spill out of you, I wonder what it would look like. I bet everyone's like, I'd probably be like a black tarry substance and really smelly and stuff, but I'm picturing like the Nickelodeon slime. Get my attention before talking to me. They did get mad at me when I miss the first half of what they are saying, but it's because I'm already doing something. I don't mind pausing my game, putting down my book/phone, muting the TV, etc. Just say my name, or even, hey, you, before you start talking so I realize I'm supposed to engage. I think that just sounds like a lack of awareness of your surroundings. Like, I like to know who is in the room with me, what's going on, stuff like that at all times. So it's like, are they on the phone? No. Is there anyone else in the room with me? No. So they're obviously talking to me. It's only annoying when they then turn around and go, oh, I'm just talking to myself. You don't have to listen. I understand that compared to you, I shouldn't have any stress, but teen stress does exist. Maybe in the future I'll learn how naive I was and how small my stresses now are, but right now, what I'm stressed about matters to me. That's super valid, but I will say, yeah, being an adult kinda sucks. Enjoy being a teenager while you can. Don't stop me from hanging out with my friends and then later complain why am I always in my room and not outside enjoying life. That's just unfair. That does sound pretty dumb, but I don't know, it maybe depends on the kind of people that you're hanging out with. Doesn't mean you can't go out and enjoy life, it just means they don't want you to be hanging out with dodgy people. Like I said though, I don't know what the situation is behind this, I'm just trying to rationalize it to some degree. Communication through technology is still communication. I know it's not true for all people my parents' age, but a lot seem to be stuck on the idea that just because you're texting someone or messaging them online, it's somehow not real contact and not a real relationship with the other person. Does someone have an online girlfriend? That's the way they make it sound at the end, especially. While yes, you do pay for my tuition, car, clothing, food, etc., you need to give me some sense of control. Rules are important, I understand, but I need to learn how to function on my own. If you couldn't tell from my brother developing alcoholism the second he got to college, if you control your kids too hard in high school and then let them out into college, they don't know what to do with the freedom and go frickin' nuts. That is some solid parenting advice. That is so true. Don't snoop through my things. If I have a personal note to or from a friend or a piece of writing, don't look through it and read it, and don't send a picture of it to everyone else in the family. It's out of sight for a reason. People might disagree with me, but I kind of think that parents can snoop through their kids' stuff all they want. If they have a habit of doing it, just get better at hiding your stuff. Don't make fun of our relationships. Whenever they see me talking to a girl, they always ask, who's your new girlfriend? They always ask me after school, how's your girlfriend doing? Even when they know I'm not in a relationship, or even right after I break up, I know they're not doing it to be mean, but it's little stuff like this that makes me hesitant to share my actual relationships with them. Just remember that this is sort of an awkward time for us and relationships are no exception. I always try to take it in jest because I know they're kidding, but other people might take it as an insult. Or you pushing them to find a girlfriend/boyfriend when they are not ready. Also, just because I've been stressed or mopey doesn't mean I'm gay. It just means I don't feel like talking. I've had to explain twice to my parents that I am not a closeted homosexual. Just sounds like pretty basic parental banter to me, but if it's something that this guy's stressed out about, then yeah, fair enough. We're so dramatic because a lot of things are new. We can feel new levels of emotion. It might seem silly to cry over someone we've dated for less than a year, but this is literally the most heartbroken we've ever been. Our schoolwork is the hardest we have ever done. Our responsibilities are the most daunting. From our perspective, what seems trivial to you is new and terrifying and the most extreme it has ever been. I think I've been gauging this more on like the general situation in that like how relatable is this? I understand this is more of a personal thing, but I'm going to say this, parents are dealing with not as many for sure, but also new stressful situations, and it's not about being an adult or a teenager or something like that because I've said it before. Adults don't have all the answers. And on the heartbreak thing, think about it like this. Yeah, your heart's broken. You like this girl a lot, but at least this girl isn't divorcing you. She's taking your money, your house, and your dog. She didn't even want the dog when you got the dog, but she certainly wants it now. My advice to anyone when they're in a dire state of mind or something is think about the situation, think about how much worse it could be and where you are as opposed to the worst it could be, and then just get on with your life because guess what? All of these situations are bigger in your mind than they are in real life. Of course, then there are problems like paying the mortgage on time. That's a big problem. Our problems are real. My mom is really good at understanding this. She gets angry along with me when I mention how my best friend got hit by her boyfriend. She gives me advice when I say that my friends have depression. She gets worried when I'm quiet and easily angered. Not only does she empathize, she helps. She once dialed 911 for a friend who had attempted self-deletion while I told her how to apply first aid. She gave me permission to deck the abusive boyfriend. She lent me her old psychology textbook so that I could better help my friend with depression. She makes me feel comfortable enough to talk about whatever is bothering me. Most people on this thread give very good examples of what not to do. Let my mother be the model for what to do. I mean it every time I say that she is the best mom ever. Okay, now let's talk about my dad. He is every bit as awesome as my mom, just in different ways. He grew up as the oldest son in a ghetto in San Antonio. He was the first in my family to go to college. He's worked for the Air Force, has been a pastor, been a missionary, and is now a higher up at an energy savings firm. Because of him, I've always lived a comfortable life, but it does not stop there. He teaches me everything he knows. I remember him explaining his Excel spreadsheet in 5th grade. In middle school, he started giving me a large monthly allowance and told me to pay for basically everything but rent in order to teach me money management. I'll be honest, I talk more to my mom about emotional problems. She got her degree in psychology after all, but I can talk to my dad about literally anything else. Personal finances, politics, theology, current events, books, movies, anything that pops into my head, I can talk to my dad about. He taught me that even if you can't do masculine things like repair a car or assemble furniture, you can still be one of the greatest men out there. I've learned so much from him, and I learned more every day. I told him about this post and asked him if he had anything he wanted to share with the internet. He said, "When your mother and I first had your older brother, we decided that we would have 2 goals in parenting. That you would know that we love you unconditionally, and that you would know we are always there for you. Everything else we do flows out of those 2 goals." Yeah, he actually talks like that. It's awesome. If there are any parents or teens reading this, strive to be like my parents. I wouldn't trade them for anything. Sounds like you got a strong nuclear family right there. You got a mother and a father who are both experienced in their own personal areas of expertise that they use to then build you up into a more rounded person and tell you that they love you all the time. Brag much? Nah, this is good. This was a nice game changer. Yeah, that's how a family should be. You can't pause an online game! Oh, I feel the Lord in the house tonight. Testify, brother, testify! I hope you all appreciate the extra oomph I put into that one. So many arguments about that stuff. Don't assume that teen life today is the same as teen life when you were in high school. If your teen doesn't have a history of stereotypical bad teen behavior, don't treat them like they do. Yeah, I agree with that. For one thing, I think a lot of modern kids probably have anxiety because their simplest mistakes or even their biggest mistakes can be immortalized on a phone then uploaded to the internet within a few minutes. On the latter part, I don't know. I see a lot of scummy behavior from kids that I very much doubt they exhibit in front of their parents. Naturally, that's a case-by-case basis, but there are definitely some kids in the world that are unbelievably entitled. If your child doesn't agree with your religious views, back off and let them think it through. Pushing harder isn't helping and will just make them less likely to return to your faith in the future. I hid my true faith from my parents and went along with their faith for years. My sister decided to come out about her views, and that's how I know I made the right choice. Yeah, just generally don't try and force your opinions on kids in general or anything because, they might turn around and decide that they hate you and all of your ideas. Currently 17 and I'm really into technology. I got a job at 15 because I wanted to build a computer and still hold it today. Anyway, the things I buy are mine. I did work for them, and yet they still threaten to take them away from me if I act irritable. Being irritable is caused by depression, anxiety, and other crap going on. The constant fighting with my sister, that gets on my nerves. Yes, she's screaming, but screaming back will not make her stop. Please, for the love of God, don't downplay my issues. Yes, my girlfriend cheated. Yes, I'm a teenager, and maybe it's not that big of an issue, but Christ, don't act like it doesn't affect me and how I act. I have to say, contrary to what I may say in any of these, I always take these stories with a slight pinch of salt. If anything, I wish I could hear the other sides of these things, because in this occasion, I wonder, although this kid seems like they're an okay kid, job at 15 and everything like that, clearly has a sense of responsibility and whatnot, that's great. But the real question is here, are you being irritable or are you being insufferable? Just because I don't go out every day does not mean I have no friends. I talk to the same people online every day and see them in class 5 days a week. My parents think I'm antisocial and would get some friends if I go outside. In reality, I am more social when you let me stay in my room. Yeah, I don't really see a problem with that. I mean, if you're just staying in all the time whenever you can, that's kind of bad for you. Catch some rays, the sun's great for you. Not in excess, of course. Nothing's good for you in excess. I know that I'm smart and I receive good grades. They just need to learn that I will never be the valedictorian or an honor roll kid or anyone they deem intelligent. I'm a little confused. Do your parents genuinely think you're stupid, or do they simply think you are not living up to the potential that you have? Stop comparing us to your high school selves. Yes, Mom, I know you're a class president, prom queen, valedictorian, and captain of the cheer team, but I'm not you, so stop being disappointed and be proud of what my person can achieve. Well, this is just annoying because now I want to know what you can/have achieved. Asking your child to tell the truth about something, and then when they do, being mad at them about it. I would much rather prefer if when I told you the truth, you would thank me for being honest and lightening the punishment, if any. This isn't just for teenagers, though. My younger sister, who is 4, gets into trouble sometimes, and when my mother asks her about it and she tells the truth, she gets very mad at her. So now whenever she asks her to tell the truth, she just lies about it. Makes me sad. Well, that makes me sad too, because you know what? When you're telling a child to tell the truth, you need to be a little more gentle about it. Yeah, they told the truth, they were brave. You don't have to reward them or anything. You just have to be cool about it. You can tell them you're disappointed. You can tell them you're upset. You just gotta be cool. I do not have a goddamn time turner. I cannot clean my room, take a shower, do all my homework, feed the cat, clean the litter box, and put together my Halloween costume in 1 hour. I hang out with older people. I'm 15. I mostly hang out with 18 to 20-year-olds I meet through activism/environmentalism, volunteer leadership stuff because the conversations are more intellectually stimulating. There's no dumb drama. They're inspiring people that I look up to a lot. Networking is easier and I've opened up amazing opportunities for myself, and frankly, I just enjoy being with them more than anybody else my age. No, we don't go off and drink booze. No, they're not peer pressuring me into having sex. No, we're not doing illegal substances. They're just nicer people. I know you think 15 is way too young to be doing traveling programs and internships, but I have plans and goals in mind for the future, and as much as I'd like to be your little girl forever, you need to let me grow up and start exploring my options. I don't understand why you can't just be happy that I'm eager about post-sex stuff already like any other parent would. Volunteering and doing environmental work isn't a waste of time. I'm networking in areas that might be useful in the future. I'm making friends that I actually like. I'm building essential skills like public speaking and fundraising. I'm making a name for myself. I'm enjoying myself and I'm giving back to the community. Please stop threatening to take away my volunteer work as punishment. Sounds like they're pretty happy doing what they're doing, so I don't understand why they don't just let them. Just, make sure that you remain to be a solid part of their life, give them support and love and stuff like that, and make sure that none of their 20-plus-year-old friends are just waiting for them to turn 18. It might be legal, but I'd still say it's grounds for grooming. Probably too late, but this one bugs the hell out of me. It isn't the 70s and 80s anymore. Yes, we understand that you didn't use your TVs barely at all. You rode your bikes and played basketball, etc., etc. And yes, we understand it's good for us to be active, but we live in a different generation. The generation before them married young, didn't have all the extra time due to technological advances that makes life easier and so on. Things change, and yet parents still parent like they wish they had been 30 years ago. I love my parents to death, but that's my biggest pet peeve with them. That's a conversation I have fairly frequently. I mean, it's weird to think that a couple hundred years ago, you'd have until maybe you were 30 or something like that, and that would be considered a full life, maybe for good reason. Lord knows it sucks to get so old that you literally cannot do anything for yourself. But I think as a result, with modern technology, medicine, and all that stuff, we have a generation of people that just kind of stay as teenagers for a lot longer than they probably should. That ain't me judging or anything like that, but, always keep in mind that you should really get your life on track. Learn to use a computer. Oh god, I super get this one. I think my mother only learned how to use a computer, she uses a tablet really, about 5 or so years ago. What's really annoying is that she still doesn't know how to copy and paste. Because I said so is a crappy reason. Depends on what they're asking you to do. It's not weird for a Hispanic truck driver to deliver to the Hong Kong market. Ah, yes, the immortal rivalry of the Chinese and the Mexicans. Your favoritism towards my sister devastates me. I mean, how can they help it? She's so much cooler than you. I kid. Favoritism, at least really, really blatant favoritism that results in, neglect is really awful.
Parents commenting on how I spend my money. I only spend about 20% of what I make on things I frickin' want that I now have to hide. This is how my closet under my bed is now full of Magic the Gathering cards. If they only knew how much I spent.
I don't know, card games are kind of a money sink. I mean, you get into them and then you gotta keep up with expansions that introduce new mechanics into the game because then your old decks are kind of obsolete based around the new hotness of the game. I play Digimon, the card game, sometimes, I haven't bought any for ages because I just look at how many I have and go, ugh, and then I've missed expansions and I don't really want to get into new expansions. It's a whole thing. Don't get into card games unless you are acutely aware that you are probably going to spend a lot of money if you're really getting into them. You shouldn't try to tell your kids what choices to make for things like college or uni. Sure, you can help them, but don't try to tell them to do something that they don't want to do. Well then please, just don't choose a topic that's utterly useless in the real world and won't make you any money and then complain and moan that everyone else should pay for your education. That might sound critical of me, but with the power of the internet, you can honestly learn all of these things that you could at university for free. Which is why my position on college and university learning personally is that you should take a few years off, do things, live your life, figure out what you actually want to do and what you enjoy doing, and then go to university with the knowledge of what you want to do and that you love doing is worth pursuing and paying for. But hey, I'm just a disappointed voice on the internet that as of yet hasn't gone to university, so what does my opinion matter? Do not tell your children if they were gay you would not go to the wedding. It's like saying that if I don't fit your mold, I'm not worthy of your love. It's also setting yourself up for years of distrust. I want to be open and I want them to be a part of my life so badly, but if they knew anything, even suspected anything, they wouldn't want to be a part of mine. The job of a parent is to guide, discipline, and love unconditionally. You can't change how your kid came out, but you can still love them. My parents should learn that if I could be different, I would be. If I could change myself, I could be their definition of normal. I would be. My parents should learn that my wildest dream is for them to love me for exactly who I am, just as much as I love them. I totally agree with the general message here, gay teens getting kicked out of homes, it's real freaking hard on them, being left out in the elements and no one to love them and stuff, and usually falling into bad habits or with people that take advantage of their emotional state, but I do believe that there are limits to unconditional love. For example, killing someone in cold blood, being a kitty fiddler. Just two examples of things that I would personally disown anyone for. But just being not exactly set to the mold that people expect of you, it's complete bullcrap when people disown you for that. Stop thinking you know everything. I can't get over this. Whenever my mom and I are doing something that involves modern technology, she just takes over like she knows everything and messes it up. I know what to do and try to tell her calmly, but she doesn't listen and sends everything to hell. 2. Whatever people say or write is not me. Whenever my mom goes through my things, she sees what other people have wrote and accuses me of writing them. She then tells me to tell her the truth, which I do, and I will still get accused of lying. Privacy is real. You were a teenager and I am a teenager. I go through a lot and the least I can get is some privacy. I can go on Google and search for something and she'll come into my room and start reading what I'm typing out loud or stand behind me watching what I'm doing. She'll also go through my phone, which is annoying. I just log out of my stuff now. 4. Stop calling me every 5 minutes. School is long, hard, and tiring and I get frustrated. I go home and try to relax before chores. Mom comes home and starts calling me 24/7 over little things. One day I actually just stood leaning on the wall waiting for her to call me, so I didn't get comfortable. 5. Let me go places without you. I can't even go to a school football game without my mom saying I'm not going by myself. Then she complains why I'm always indoors. My mom also makes me do other irritating stuff which I don't follow anyway, like reading 2 to 4 chapters of the Bible before going on the iPhone, iPad, computer, TV, or playing games, GTA 5, Mortal Kombat X, etc. Limits on all devices. Well, I say, son, they don't sound like wholesome Christian games. I say, you gotta play yourself some Yakuza. Oh man, that just hit me. Mortal Kombat X was the last Mortal Kombat game I bought. Is it that old now? It's almost 10 years old, goddamn. I would say to them, the American dream idea is dead at this point in time. You could work hard and go to the right schools and have it still not pan out later in life. Half of the kids graduating higher education levels are having trouble finding jobs. So get off this idea that hard work leads to success, because it just is not true at this point in time. I see where this person is coming from a sense that I see a lot of things nowadays where depending on what your sense of success is, whether it be followers or money or whatever like that, people do stupid, inconsequential stuff, and for some reason it brings them success. But guess what? Things might not work out the way that you wanted them to if you applied loads of hard work in school or on a topic or cultivating knowledge that you wanted because you thought, yeah, this will make me successful. But you know what? Life doesn't work like that. You now have the knowledge to do something, and you need to keep on striving and looking for the opportunities that you can get to apply that knowledge and those skills that you have cultivated yourself. It might take time before you can actually apply those things in a way that you deem makes you successful or content with life or whatever, but please, for the love of God, don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on working hard and working towards your dreams.
Parents of Reddit, what's the funniest reason you've been called into school to collect your child? I was called to collect my son when he was in first grade because, quote, he was being disrespectful to his classmates. They wouldn't explain. My son told me that Jeffrey pantsed him, and that makes no sense. About an hour later, the light bulb went on. You didn't wear underwear today, did you? Nope. When I was in middle school, some poor guy got pantsed right in front of me, a girl who shared many of his classes. Normally, it'd be no big deal. Someone got pantsed in my school on at least a weekly basis. No, the really awkward part was I was kind of crouched down because I had a bottom locker and he was standing up with the top locker next to mine. Not above, but I guess on a diagonal. His pantser shouted right as he pulled, so of course I looked up at the shout because it startled me. And well, the pantsed individual's boxers had been pulled down along with his pants, so right in front of my eyes was a dingaling. It was the first dingaling I'd ever seen in person, well outside of seeing like baby cousins get changed and stuff, and considering we were 11, I was presumably the first girl, outside of his close family when he was little, to see his dingaling. It was just for a split second because obviously the guy pulled his pants back up with lightning reflexes. I've never seen someone go so red in the face. We both stood there in shock for a couple of seconds as the hallway cleared and began walking in class. We shared the next class. Oh no, that's even more awkward. The whole time he was stammering out apologies and I kept telling him it wasn't his fault. It's not like he'd pulled his own pants down. After class, other students asked me if I'd seen it, and I lied profusely. What are you talking about? He was wearing underwear. How would I see anything? Oh, well, in the back they came down. The whole hallway could see his butt. Oh my god, well, they didn't come down in the front. The rest of the year, this guy who was a practical stranger was pretty nice to me. Not like flirty nice, but I think he figured out that I lied, so I felt he owed me one. I was called in because the elementary school was going on a field trip that my son forgot to give me the permission slip for. He decided to give forgery a whirl. This was in first grade, so the handwriting was awful. He also signed my name, Mom. I got a phone call earlier this year from the school nurse, saying she was concerned because my son had passed out while on the lunch line. I went to pick him up and he seemed a little dazed, but okay. My kid couldn't remember anything about what happened beforehand, so I made an appointment with his pediatrician for an hour later. Right as we're getting to leave, he sheepishly said, "Mom, I just remembered that right before I passed out, we were playing a game to see who could turn their face the reddest." So, my kid had me thinking he had a brain tumor, but no, he just held his breath until he passed out, and not a single other kid thought they should mention that to the teacher. Embarrassed to admit, but I've done this before. I was getting ready for school in the morning and decided out of the blue to do this. Promptly passed out and cracked my head on the dresser on the way down. I come to almost immediately and just sat there on the floor confused as to what happened. I already had this huge lump forming on my head and a killer headache, but I didn't want to tell my dad because I didn't want him to be mad. So I went to school and was miserable all day. When I got home, I finally told my sister. She took one look and ran to tell Mom. I had a goose egg-sized lump on my head. All said and done, I had 2 MRIs and a sleep test. Don't know the proper name. Everything turned out fine in the end. I never admitted I'd passed out because I held my breath too long. In my senior year of high school, I was nearly not allowed to graduate, and my family was called because I forged my own name by writing in the guardian section of a permission slip. I was 18. My kid got in huge trouble in kindergarten. A girl told the teacher he said the S word. He lost recess, they called me, it was a big deal. I went to pick him up and said, "So what's the S word?" And he stared at his shoes and whispered, "Sexy." Yeah, confirmed by the little tattletale. All of this was caused by sexy. Funniest one I've ever heard. My kid surprisingly well behaved at school. Was a parent having to come get their kid after they were caught selling imaginary friends to the younger students for $1 apiece. I made the mistake of telling my stepdaughter about the professor I had in college that we never knew read our papers, so it turned into a class game to fit ridiculous sentences and bad jokes into the middle of them to see if we'd ever get caught. She apparently decided that was an amazing thing to do, and I got called for a phone conference because she turned in a history paper that was chock full of awful puns that were not appreciated. My mother was called to pick me and my twin sister up because we were turning blue. I think it was in 4th grade. We felt fine though. It was only after she arrived that we all remembered she had put brand new blue flannel sheets on our bed the night before. Apparently, she hadn't washed them first. My little brother liked cheese and mustard sandwiches, so my mom made him cheese and mustard sandwiches for lunch. When the teacher asked why he didn't have any meat on his sandwich, he said either "we can't afford meat" or "my mom doesn't let me," or something like that. Whatever he said was enough to send CPS over to the house. Another time, he came to school saying that his mom loved Coke, that his mom said she's addicted to Coke. CPS was called again. They lived in a different area this time. Coca-Cola. My mom couldn't go a day without a Coke, so she joked that she was addicted to Coke. I do see the irony that she was actually addicted to a drug, just not the one CPS was worried about. I got a call that my son was sick and that I had to come pick him up. He was completely fine that morning. I asked the nurse, "He really can't go back to class?" And she said, "He says he's really sick." Fine. I picked him up and on the walk home I asked what was up. He said he had to fart really badly and didn't want to do it in class. I laughed and said okay. 2 days later, I get another call to pick him up. So I got him and it was for the same reason. I told him that it was funny once, but that from now on, if he needed to fart in class, he should go to the bathroom. Daycare. Had to talk to the director because my son, 3 or 4, told another kid, "I'm gonna F you up." Turns out he was singing Bruno Mars' Uptown Funk You Up. My child's 1st grade teacher was upset that he had accidentally smooshed a butterfly on the playground at recess. When I got there, my child was also missing his glasses. She hadn't noticed this. My youngest had a slight speech impediment when he was at nursery. He would replace his S's with F's to approximate the sound. I had to have a chat with the head at pickup time because I'd unthinkingly used the phrase "so long, suckers" when pulling away from some traffic lights the day before, and he liked the sound of it so much he used it himself. My professor cited my mom because she said I was writing too slow and turned my test in right as the bell rang. My mom had to leave work early to hear about her child writing slow. The reason I was writing slow was because on my last test, I was docked points for handwriting. So this time, I made sure I had the purtiest, most fanciest handwriting that teacher had ever seen. After that, the teacher stopped docking me points due to handwriting. As somebody with notoriously crappy handwriting, I felt this post. That was in elementary school, early years. The principal called us and looked at us with a stern look of disapproval while telling us our son was using bad language. I then proceeded to explain to her that my wife and I only spoke French at home and we did not have television. The only English our son had ever heard was at school, so I asked her what she was going to do about it. It was one of the shortest conversations I ever had with that principal. About the principal, as I recall, she suddenly remembered she had to do something urgently and the meeting was over before I could say anything else. Literally, pardon my French. I was the kid and I was in 3rd grade. I climbed on a tree, not even that high, and then I wanted to climb down. A teacher who hated me saw me and told me to stay there and not to move. I told her it's no problem for me to come down. She insisted I stayed there and turned around to call the fire brigade to get me down. I had enough and climbed down anyway, and then she called my mom because it was my fault the fire brigade was called for no reason. I was in an early morning college class, and when I got out, I realized I had missed calls, texts, and emails from my daughter's preschool. A voicemail said she had been throwing up and to please hurry and come get her. When I got to the school, the receptionist showed me to a room where my daughter was sat with the trash can on her lap. She told me my daughter kept announcing she was throwing up and then would cough into the trash can. She had no fever and was otherwise cheerful and talkative. I signed her out, got her outside, and into my car where she jumped forward and kissed my cheek and told me she missed me and where would I like to go for lunch. That kid busted herself out of preschool to finagle a lunch date with me. It worked. Aww. I was the child in 6th grade. I was 12. I was in my emo phase and was wearing a lot of black eyeshadow from Claire's. I guess I wasn't so good at my makeup yet because they called my mom into the office to discuss my injuries and who was, in quotes, hurting me. I had super bad allergies as a child to the point where I had awful dark circles under my eyes that legitimately looked like bruises. I had the principal and my teacher asking if everything was okay at home and pointed to my eyes. I let them know about my allergies and they skeptically accepted the answer. 2 weeks later, I stepped in a large hole in the ground by accident and fell flat on my face, giving me an actual black eye. Trying to explain to the principal, my teacher, and the school counselor that I actually fell was no easy task. My son went to a private Catholic school from 1st grade through 8th grade. I had a nun call me one day because my son and a friend were having a peeing for distance contest in the bathroom. And then another day I was called because my son was looking to see if the dictionary had the word dingaling in it. Both incidents were in the 3rd grade. When I was in 7th grade, I was an office runner. Basically, if your reading and writing skills were above a certain level, they let you skip reading class and just work in the office, getting kids whose parents had come for them, delivering messages, that sort of thing. Anyway, the kid next to me just wouldn't shut the heck up. He kept rattling on and on and on, and I had enough of it. I had a monster fart brewing, so I cocked my leg, locked eyes with him, told him to shut his mouth, and farted on him. Or, at least, that was the plan. Instead, I cocked my leg, locked eyes with him, told him to shut his mouth, and completely crapped my pants in the most glorious fashion. This wasn't a little nugget. This was a full pants load of chocolate pudding that ran down my leg and made a little puddle on the floor. Everything in the office goes dead silent, and there's no mistaking what's just happened. The kid just stared at me with absolute horror in his eyes. Without looking away from him, I raised my hand and said, "Miss Office Lady's name, I don't remember. I think I need to call my mom." I went home, took a bath, threw the pants away, and came back the next day. The kid was seated on the opposite side of the room from me, and I never had a problem with him again. He feared and respected me from then on. Anybody want dessert? My dad got sent to the principal's office for telling his 6th grade teacher she was pronouncing the state capital of South Dakota, Pierre, wrong. She kept saying Pierre, 2 syllables like the French name, and he said it was Pierre, 1 syllable, like what you fish off of. He was sent off for not respecting a teacher's authority. My grandma had to drive to school to talk to the teacher and principal and says, "Did you ask why he says it's Pierre? Because if you did, you'd find out that both his father and I are from South Dakota. He visits his grandparents and aunts and uncles in South Dakota every summer. He knows plenty of people from South Dakota who all say Pierre. Do you know anyone from South Dakota? No? Well, take it from a South Dakotan. It's Pierre. We're not fancy French people, and stop wasting my time." Okay, but to be honest, I didn't know it was Pierre either. I kept saying Pierre all my life, so I'm sorry if there's anybody out there who was offended by my ignorance as a young child. So yeah, let's just keep going. We don't have to talk about it. My son, 14, 8th grade, during class change, walked into the boys' bathroom, put his hands over his head, and while thrusting his hips in a humping motion, told all the other boys in the room to "Protect your buttholes, gentlemen, here I come." The funniest part about it all, that exact same description was jotted down on the write-up slip. Even the principal couldn't stop laughing. My daughter hid inside of a toy box for hours in preschool, and the teachers couldn't find her. She's gonna be my wild child. When I was in 2nd grade, I had a shirt that we got as a hand-down from a friend of my mom's with Braille on the front. Apparently, no one ever took the time to figure out what it said, but there was a translator/key on the sleeve, so I sat down and translated the word on the front, 1 letter at a time while in class. F-U-C-K-O-F-F. "Oh my," I said. I knew this was a bad word, so I told my teacher and apologized. I wasn't in trouble, but my parents were called and asked to come bring in a new shirt while I waited in the office. My principal thought it was hilarious, apparently. We had a classmate who was partially blind. I'm unsure if she had vision enough to see my shirt, but she did know Braille. I believe that is one of the reasons I had to wait in the office, though. Not a parent, but as a kid, when I got Pokemon Yellow, I was so gosh darn into it that when we went out for lunch one day at school, I got inside this huge bush that was practically hollow inside. It was among a load of other large bushes and trees at the side of the school field, and rarely ever was entered by students because we weren't really allowed. So I sat there for hours playing Pokemon, and when I came out it was 3 p.m. School closed at 3:30. I had been in there since 12:30, and my mother was at the school and was freaking out because she thought they let me leave the school alone. I got called on my work cell several times right out of college to come to a local high school because my 14-year-old son was in trouble. I don't have a son, and if I had a son, it would be very impressive if he was 14 years old then because I would have had to conceive him when I was 9. I told them that. They kept calling. Finally, I showed up at the high school to prove that I, a 23-year-old white guy, was not the father of the 14-year-old Indian boy. The assistant principal was like, "Oh, right." My mom told me that when my brother was in grade school, she got the call to pick him up for a day's suspension. Turned out during lunch, he opened his lunchbox and pulled out a can of Foster's. It was empty and it was meant to be a joke, but the school didn't see it that way. He was 9 and right at the start of a decade-long mission to raise heck. I got a call to pick up my daughter in kindergarten because she had no underwear. She had them on when I put her on the bus, so I have no idea what happened. Totally embarrassing. Oh my. I have 4 kids, all adults now, who were pretty high-spirited back in the day. My oldest son, however, wins the prize from an incident in 6th grade. I got a call one afternoon that he had been sent to the principal's office. Nothing new there, and I needed to come get him at once. Uh-oh. He had mooned the second graders. All of them. And their teachers. Not me, but a classmate of a coworker sent everyone home many years ago. He nicked a decent bit of elemental potassium from the chemistry lab and dropped it down the sewer access pipe outside the school. This was not good for the school's plumbing. City had to dig up the sidewalk to repair things. For those not aware, here's a quick chemistry lesson. Potassium plus water equals violent boom. Nobody should be throwing any sort of potassium or sodium down a sewer pipe because that will cause severe problems. Not me, but my sister. She got a call from her son's very Catholic school that he needed to be picked up. She gets to the school and the principal said that he had to go home for the day because he peed on the tree outside at recess. He really laid into her about how they had to bleach the tree. Seriously, they poured bleach on the tree because a little kid peed on it. And it was terrible, and how she shouldn't be teaching her son these things. My sister looked him straight in the eye and asked, "Do you really think I have the right plumbing to have taught him that? Yell at my husband when he comes in next time." Me, when I was a kid, we moved from Middle America to the West Coast. I had extra R sounds in my words. They called my mom about my speech impediment. After talking to my mom, they understood that it was not a speech impediment, but my birth sound language. It is Washington, not Washington. It's funny now, but wasn't at the time. One day, I was called to pick up my daughter from school. I asked why and was vaguely told she had been caught cheating, was being disrespectful to the teacher, and had destroyed government property. Holy crap, I thought. What had she done? My mind instantly went through scenarios in which she had cheated on a test, got caught, that my sweet little 7-year-old had cursed the teacher while throwing something out the window. I go to the school, found my scared daughter in the principal's office looking totally dejected and asked for an explanation. I discovered the cheating was that she had giggled while playing a game where someone was it, and the other half of the classroom had to guess who it was. The disrespecting teacher was from her crossing her arms when she was being told how she wrecked the game. The best was the explanation for destroying government property. During story time, she was picking at loose carpet threads. I was extremely angry with my daughter the whole drive from work, and after this load of WTF, it instantly transferred to anger with the school. You called me here because she giggled, crossed her arms, and picked at old nasty carpet? I was hot and took my daughter home, letting her know I was a bit upset with her, but let her know that there would be no more punishment. She'd been through enough. We went home and watched cartoons, and I made her favorite grilled cheese and tomato soup for lunch. I received a call from the vice president of my daughter's school one day while I was at work. I could tell the VP was holding back her laughter, but she tried to remain professional. "Hello. Your daughter acted out in class today. The children were switching from coloring to reading at the carpet. She threw her crayons down and pointedly said to the teacher, 'Are you freaking kidding me?' My knee-jerk reaction was, 'Dang it, are you freaking kidding me?' It's clear where she learned this from. My second thought was, dang, I have a kid in junior kindergarten that knows how to use that phrase in a correct form. The following year, the VP is no longer at the school. We attend similar social groups and talk often. She loves to tell me that making that phone call was one of the funniest calls she has had to make as an educator. My dad was called into the school when I was in grade 1. Apparently, I've been caught with my hand in a girl's pants and hers in mine while in class. Okay, but I feel like we're missing context here. By apparently, I can think of 2 options. 1, you were caught but didn't know that you had done anything wrong until your dad came to pick you up. Or 2, you were somehow pegged as doing something you didn't actually do, which, given most American school systems, I could easily believe. But where's the evidence, OP? Nephew was staying with me for 2 months. I showed him Dexter's Laboratory for the first time. Next day, they called me to pick him up because he would only say omelette de fromage to any interaction. I too was the child. I peed on my friend in 5th grade. Another pee one? What's going on here? We were competing in who could pee the furthest back from the urinal when a buddy of mine decided to run underneath it for laps. Hand slipped, peed down his back. Sent to the principal's. My 4-year-old's teacher told me he had repeatedly called her a butthole. She had taken something away from him and said, "That's all." Every time she came near him, he said, "That's all" to her. Knowing him, he probably used the same tone of voice she had used, and she was a nasty piece of work. In case you don't get it, say "that's all" to yourself in increasingly varying tones, and you'll see why he got in trouble. Unicorn Club. So my daughter was in 5th grade. She was proving to be pretty responsible, so she was allowed to have a cell phone, because she was home about an hour before I was on weekdays, and an Instagram account that I heavily monitored. We never had any issues, still haven't, and now she's in high school. Well, I get a call from her school's principal one day. He tells me 2 boys were fistfighting in the lunchroom. I asked what that had to do with my daughter. Well, apparently, my child had used an Instagram account to start what was essentially a cult called Unicorn Club. Unicorns were obviously the worshipped deity, with goats being the devil figure to the unicorn gods. These two boys got into a fistfight over whether unicorns or goats were better. I had to pick her up to prevent further disputes and disband Unicorn Club. TLDR, my 10-year-old daughter created a small cult around unicorn worship. Guys, leave a comment right now. Unicorns or goats? My child with mild tree nut allergy went to the nurse since she ate a mystery food and her throat felt weird. She has been evaluated and her allergy does not warrant an EpiPen. I rush over because she usually gets hysterical and would need Benadryl, which the school can't administer. I arrive. She's all smiles. She feels better now after some water. The mystery food? Fuego Takis. She was 6 when this happened. The one that made me laugh and shake my head was when my son was in the 2nd grade. He decided that instead of helping one of his fellow classmates with his work, that he'll just do his work for him. When I asked him why, his answer really tickled me. Mom, so our table will be the first table to get snacks.
Teachers who go to high school reunions, what are the most striking stories you've seen? Not a teacher, but a graduate from high school in a crystal-addled city in the South, actually featured on a list placing number 1 for the most addicted city in Georgia. I can say that everyone who was successful left and stayed gone. According to the Facebook event page, like 10 people went. Possibly related, who pays $60 per ticket to hang out in a school gymnasium for their 10-year reunion? Here, we're number 10 in this alphabetical list of most addicted counties by state. Also not a teacher, but have been out of high school, an all-girls school, for 6 years. At our 5-year reunion, I caught up with a girl who was severely bullied during high school. She fell off a horse in grade 8 while riding competitive and legitimately snapped her spine, and was in a very intense back brace for her entire high school career. And my God, the other girls were so nasty to her. She would get made fun of for her appearance, and there was an incident where someone filmed her in class without her knowledge and then edited the video to have all these sexual innuendos about her back brace, and it was posted on Facebook. Our principal was also a horrible woman, and when the video got reported to the principal somehow blamed this girl instead of penalizing the bully. She ended up having to stay back a year because her disability was so bad and she couldn't complete her schoolwork and was unable to graduate. She was incredibly religious as well, and the other girls used to make weird Christian incest jokes about her mum having to bathe her because she couldn't bathe herself due to her back brace. Anyway, now she's doing some fancy medical degree in the UK and is pain-free and out of the back brace. She looks amazing, healthy, glowing, and rigorously kicks butt at the gym every day to physically rehabilitate her body. The best part of the story is that she has absolutely no ill will to the girls who bullied her. It upset her at the time, but she didn't let it scar her. She knew that her bullies were obviously insecure and dealing with some inner demons, if they went out of their way to ruin her life. She felt bad for them more than anything. I run into her at the gym all the time, and it's so nice to see her so confident and thriving. Nothing like a great recovery story to lift the spirits from the mire of high school misery. I sat beside this girl Joni in grade 8. She was so smart and really pretty. She would always finish the year with 95% averages, even as high as 98 in some subjects. I was a hooligan, that's why I was seated next to her. She would help me with stuff, always let me copy her homework, peek at tests. There's no way I would have passed without her. The teacher would always say you'll never get anywhere if you just copy Joni all the time. She works the drive-thru at A&W now, and has a herd of children with some skeezy-looking guy who's in and out of jail. Breaks my heart when I see her. So much potential to end up flipping burgers. I always wonder where it went wrong with her. 9 times out of 10, crappy home life. Just finally got to her. Found someone who loved her like she wasn't at home and got pregnant. If you only love you 20%, finding someone who loves you 30% is like winning the lottery. Not a teacher, but about a girl I used to be interested in since elementary school. We were really close friends. I'd even work for her dad when I was a kid. Stuffing envelopes for him to send out to his clients, just basic stuff that he offered us 10 cents per envelope to be a nice guy. In high school, we drifted apart a little, and she's starting dating another friend of mine who shortly after noped out of that relationship because she wanted him to make her pregnant. Fast forward a couple of years after graduation, and she did have children, who she then suffocated when they were 3 years old and 22 months old, sentenced to over 40 years in jail. She was smart, pretty, and charming, and now she might never see the outside world again. Needless to say, she didn't make it to the 10-year reunion. 13 dead out of 217, class of 11. 2 car wrecks, 1 took their own life, 1 dead soldier, 1 lost at sea, and the rest overdosed. We did a 5-year reunion because we lost like 4 of them during year 4. I swear, staying in your hometown after high school will kill you. Not a teacher, but there was a guy who was a stereotypical jock in high school. Very unemotional, stoic, etc. Then he went into the military and got PTSD. Now he's a hippie and a psychotherapist. The buttheads that graduated my year of 2001 tried to organize our 10-year reunion in 2010. Class of 2001 represent. My wife and I skipped our 10-year because it was literally a pizza party with an open bar and daycare. I'm not flying back for that. After the reunion, there was a big meltdown on the class Facebook page about how everyone was still in the same cliques as teenagers. None of the actually awesome people showed up. Maybe the 20-year will be better. It was not better. Not a teacher, but I went to my 10-year reunion. Back in high school, we had a kid who has Asperger's and was a little weird. He was, however, amazing at the yo-yo, having picked one up during middle school when we had that yo-yo trick assembly. Everyone else had stopped walking the dog in 8th grade. This guy was doing more and more elaborate tricks every day during lunch. He was bullied and teased, but he continued doing what he loved. So at our 10-year reunion, people from every strata of high school popularity there was, including this guy. He was his same old self, but more confident. I asked him if he still yo-yos, and he busted out his custom-made titanium yo-yo that he said he made on a CNC lathe. He then starts to do some tricks, and a large crowd gathered around. It was quite the show. He had gotten very good. When he finished, people clapped and cheered, and even the jockiest dudes from back in the day fist-bumped and told him how badass he was. The most amazing transformation was everyone else. Nobody teased him for being who he was anymore. They now admired him for being so passionate about something. I'm really hoping for a Kevin update one of these days. The narrator hopes this as well. To understand the context of the legend that is Kevin, check out one of our earlier videos, Teachers, what's your "that student definitely isn't going places" moment video. Kevin was a child with what I can only describe as a list of impressive achievements in stupidity. He was very entertaining to hear from, and one wonders how he'd got to 13 years old. In high school, I was pretty good friends with a guy that was a bit overweight, about 6'4", really smart and a bit nerdy. Lost track of him after high school, but then saw him at our 10-year reunion. He was the talk of the reunion. Still tall, but had lost all the weight and was in great shape, and had long hair like Fabio and was a doctor. He showed up with a beautiful wife. He then gave us his contact info and invited us to Atlanta to stay with him in his big house. After the reunion, I tried to get in touch. Contact info didn't work, and through some sleuthing I found out he was neither married nor a doctor. He was still in good shape, can't fake that, but faked everything else.
He was still tall, though. What if he showed up and he was like 5'5"?
Now that's a story. Not really a surprise, but the guy who used to bully me all the time is basically homeless. He refuses to go back to his parents, absolutely nothing wrong with them, he just never got out of the rebel teen phase, and spends his nights either couch surfing at a mate's or sleeping on the streets if no one can take him in. Any job he gets, he stays at until he has enough money for whatever he wants at the time, and then quits. Skates all the time and wants to go pro, but spends all his time smoking green herb and drinking and then crying about his life doesn't go anywhere. People at the reunion were astounded that he had just not changed one bit. He still used the slang words he used back then, and even tried to get his old mates to tease me like they used to, but they didn't because they're all adults now with jobs, and some even have kids. He was kicked out of the venue because he tried to pick a fight with a guy who laughed at him for how he was dressed. 30-year-old man dressed as a teenager. I think it's important to note that this guy and I used to be close friends before he started bullying me. I know his parents weren't horrible because I saw his home life firsthand, and he'd lashed out at them for simple things and treated them both like crap. The worst I can say about them is that they were pushovers when it came to punishing him. There were a couple of guys like that at my 10-year anniversary. Walked in like they owned the place, thought the status quo hadn't changed, then fricked right on out the door and they realized that nobody really gave a crap about high school politics 10 years after the fact. I didn't go to my 20th, but saw the list of dead people. I tried to look them up in my yearbook, but shockingly, every single one of the 7 to 8 people were in the no picture section, which was maybe 5% of the class. So either the yearbook cast a curse, or there's some correlation between not being able or not wanting to take a yearbook picture and dying young. I have a few. One guy was the star pupil. Smart, handsome, athletic, everything. Dating the head cheerleader. Some Hallmark movie crap. They leave to go off to college and nobody thinks it'll go wrong. Come 10 years later, she divorced him, was given the house his late grandfather built in the divorce, and lived in there with her new lover while he was in a hotel. 10-year reunion happens, he's deathly skinny and depressed. Sees the school, remembers the memories he had, goes home after reunion, and takes his own life, leaving behind 2 little girls. His ex got chased out of the community last year. Death threats against her and her lover. She's trying to get back in contact with people now, because the lover took her money and fled back to the Philippines, and she's now homeless. I'm a middle school teacher of over 10 years, so some of my students are high school and college graduates at this point. I'm happy to say that a good number of them have reached out to me to share life stories and updates. The one student that came to mind was confidentially severely depressed from a broken home with identity issues and wanted to take her own life. She came to me for help, and we found spoken word poetry as an outlet for her emotions, anxiety, and discovery of self-worth. She's currently returning to high school to finish her associate's degree, and she was the first in her family to graduate high school. I get updates from her on my birthday each year. She still writes and performs spoken word poetry in her spare time. A former student of mine grew up in an ultra-conservative home. He and his siblings were never allowed to socialize with other students during lunch and recess. Whenever they had free time at school, they had to read their Bibles. In science class, they were forbidden to learn about evolution. Every essay, short story, personal narrative, and poem he wrote for me involved some kind of Christian theme. When he graduated, he immediately enrolled in a big seminary in our area, and that was the last I heard of him until his class invited me to their 10-year reunion. This same kid showed up with sleeve tattoos, piercings everywhere, slamming beer after beer, and smoking like a locomotive. When I asked what he was doing now, he responded he currently worked as a bouncer at a strip club. You know what? I think the transition for this guy was probably at the very least a very interesting story. I hope this guy is happy with his new life. A frustrating thing as a teacher is not being able to remember all the kids you've taught. I've taught roughly 150 kids a year for 15 years, so it becomes hard to remember specific things about every student. I feel like a D-bag when a kid who really enjoyed my class comes up and asks me questions about life or the class he or she was in, and I can't remember much about it. I found that I usually remember high-achieving or creative students or kids who were behaved badly, as I have a soft spot for these kids. Since I usually remember the badly behaved kids, I have noticed that most of them figured it out by the time they reach 30. Most have great jobs and are well-adjusted. Conversely, many of the high-achieving students end up dropping out of college and are working low-wage jobs. I don't believe that high school is much of an indicator of future success. As long as you graduate high school and attempt college, how you performed in high school will not be that important. At a reunion, my English teacher told me to not be an English teacher. Then we started pounding wine, and I complimented her on her then recent publication of a romance novel. It was actually a great read. I commented that she had been clearly naughtier than I'd previously realized. Well, here goes nothing. Not a teacher. Well, technically I am, but this is a story from my reunion. But at high school reunion, everyone from my class was doing as well or better than could be expected, except for one guy. Let's call him John. At school, John was a smart kid, well-mannered, pretty quiet, and taller than everyone else. We were actually pretty good friends at the time, but lost touch after a while. This was before social networks. I know he went to university to study computer science, and the last thing I heard about him was that he had gotten married and had 2 kids. Anyways, I was looking forward to seeing him and finding out what he was up to for the past 15 years, but he didn't show up. Later, the teacher told us that she'd tried to contact him, but no one knows where he is. He left one day to go to work and never came back. No bodies have been found. He hasn't contacted his wife or sister. He simply vanished into thin air. I tried finding him online numerous times, but to no avail. I still try from time to time. I just hope he's safe and well. Had my 10-year reunion in the last year. Lots of people came into town. During the actual reunion, there was a lot of bragging and obvious flexing. Fast forward to the end of the night and people are planning an after-party. I end up going to it, and the buzz that everyone had at the primary event is replaced with sloppy drunkenness, and the previous boastfulness is replaced with them all confessing their insecurities, their health problems, their loveless marriages, that they hate their jobs and bosses. Was a bit awkward. In my high school, they used some of the class reps as volunteers in order to organize this 10-year meeting. My at that time class master told me that a super good-looking woman, she was 29 back then, I was 17, and damn, she was top 3 women I've ever seen in my life, was one of the dirtiest students she had ever had. She would not shower for days, and at some point she was out of school for a week or so because she got a really bad infection from her period and a lack of showers. Also, one of the smartest guys from that generation, who went to veterinary school, was convicted for selling some sort of animal tranquilizers to people, and used some on himself. He seemed super normal, but when he spoke to you, you could tell that there were some clicks in his brain that were not connecting at all. Losing the idea in the middle of the sentence, couldn't keep the voice at the same tone for more than 10 seconds, going from whispering to shouting and stuff like that. Not a teacher, but I went to my 20th about 5 years ago. The woman organizing the event was in my class since 3rd grade and was always bright, intelligent, charming, and pretty. She was very active in high school and by all counts had a very bright future. Speaking to her at the reunion, it seemed that had happened for her. We talked about her self-help and life coaching company and how they're growing and doing great. I asked her to send me more information when I got home, which is on the other side of the country. I got an email from her introducing me to her West Coast partner, whose email was from the URL esplosangeles.com, which I thought sounded very contrary to what I was expecting. A quick look at their website had me immediately worried, and a short Google later I saw that they are an offshoot of the NXIVM cult that has been all over the news. The woman I was talking to that I knew since age 8 was Lauren Salzman, who just this week pled guilty to holding 2 trafficked victims who were subjected to the unspeakable act, locked in a room for 2 years. She was trying to recruit me and basically everyone at the reunion into NXIVM. I noped right out of the email conversation and have been watching everything unfold for the last 5 years. They're all looking at some serious jail time now. Wow, I can imagine some crazy stuff having happened in people's busy decades since school, but leading a cult branch and trafficking people wouldn't have been on my bingo card. Used to have this one kid in my art class in senior high who treated it like one of those easy-to-pass classes. He was a big guy, much bigger than the other students, and he had used his size and strength to bully other kids. The smaller ones, he was a little B-word underneath it all. He would draw guns and crosses in his art book with pseudo-gangster sayings like, "Live by the gun, die by the gun," and "F the police." You get the idea. Come reunion time, which was some 5 years later, he's found a girl who really reined him in, and kind of like a hunter taming a wolf, turned him into a really good man. They had a baby boy and he's a responsible father and does yoga on the rocks by the beach. Complete 180. I do think he was a good guy underneath it all, he just needed direction from someone who could break down his walls. Teacher here, you see defense mechanisms like these all the time in kids who have been destroyed by someone they trusted. Or they've been bullied and they're trying to scare people away before they have the chance to hurt them. Or sometimes the kid is just a psychopath. That happens, but more rarely. One of the best parts about being a teacher is when you actually get a defense mechanism kid to trust you, and others, so they stop being so freaking scary all the time. I was the girl version of this. Angry, self-harm, scary drawings and poems all over my books. I would light up in front of teachers just to get reactions, and finished with a 0.5 GPA. 0.5. I was institutionalized twice. All it actually took was putting me into a supportive, unconditional environment. Now I'm working on my master's and learning a lot of skills I never realized I was missing. The only part that hurts is knowing the time I lost being in a toxic environment as a kid through high school. I hope my teachers from then know I'm doing okay. Going to post my mum's story because she doesn't have an account. She was a home economics teacher, and specifically she had one class called Relationship Psychology, where every day to start her class, she would read through that cheesy Dear Abby newspaper advice column to talk with the class on how they would respond to the problem. One day ahead of class, she noticed that a letter published talked about a kid who sounded a lot like a student in her class and was located in our hometown. They always end the letter with a name and city, and my mum was always very involved with her students and their personal lives. The letter talked about a kid who was terrified of going into college and how he got rejected from all the schools he wanted to go to, had no self-confidence, abusive father, money problems, and that he would lose all of his close friends. He couldn't stand the idea of leaving his disabled mother, and that he felt enormous pressure as a first-gen college student and had ultimately decided not to go to college at all. She read it to the class and they discussed, and she could tell the boy in her class was very uncomfortable. After class, she asked him about it, and it was in fact a letter written by him. He never thought it would get published and responded to by the Dear Abby column and was super embarrassed. He, like other students, never even knew what the Dear Abby column was until they took her class. Afterwards, she talked through everything with him and talked with his mother and evaluated his options on how to best approach college. She taught him finances, loans, scholarship options, his mum's condition, and everything, and got him into a place where he could feel better about his future. 4 years later, the kid ended up being the speaker at his college graduation of over 7,000 kids. Met his wife at college, all his groomsmen, and got a killer job through his career fair on campus before graduating. She flew out and attended as he invited her. Was always blown away by that. Like many others, I'm not a teacher, but a 35-year-old. I went to a high school in Venezuela. I left the country when I was 17 and never saw any of them until what you might call a virtual reunion on Facebook a few years ago. The reason I got to even know they had a group? The guy everyone knew bullied me was shot and killed by his best friend at the time. Apparently, he kept being a nasty piece of work after graduating, and this was the end result. Besides that, most of my classmates moved from the country due to the crisis. Those who stayed are having a bad time. Like everyone else in the country. It is weird seeing them in Facebook in random countries and doing things that I would never have expected from them as a teen. One is a cook in Sweden, one is an MMA fighter in California, one is an accountant in Australia, plenty have middle-class lives in other South American countries. Simply interesting. A student of mine went through a really tough time. His dad was actually convicted of attempted murder on his mother during his time at school, which sent the mum into a sort of apathetic depression. I walked him to the trial and I testified. I was in close contact with his therapist and social services. He's now a year from taking his master's in software engineering and he has a baby on his way. He's really happy now and his wife is the sweetest you'll ever meet. He told me that I was his role model for parenting. Made me cry. Like ugly, snot, can't breathe crying. I wish him all the luck in the world. He's going to be a great dad. Doctors, what was your dumbest,
I am very smart.
patient experience? RN here. I see some crazy stuff, but one thing that stands out was the time I was admitting a guy to the hospital. I can't really remember what for, but he was about 400 pounds, diabetic, heart disease, you name it. Anyhow, I'm at the computer going over some admission questions with him and his 10 family members who are crowded in the room with him. A few minutes in, he starts complaining that he's thirsty. He needs something to drink right now. So I get on my phone and call the nurse assistant and ask her to bring some ice water. As soon as the words are out of my mouth, the whole family screams,
No! No water! He's allergic to water!
well, this is going to be a problem. Turns out the guy has been drinking nothing but Sprite and sweet tea for years because of his water allergy. The next question the wife had was,
Where are we all supposed to sleep?
the whole family, 10 people, were planning to stay at the hospital with him. You can't make this crap up. I work in the ER. We had a very pregnant patient come in needing stitches in her hoo-ha. Turns out she was a realtor and didn't want her water to break while she was showing a house, so she put a glass cup in her pants to catch the water. Instead of using a pad or an adult diaper, she went for a glass cup. She sat down while showing a house, and sure enough, it broke and cut her up pretty bad down there. As a male who doesn't have the same anatomy as the woman in this story, I can tell you that I'm still in immense sympathetic pain right now.
Oh, I have one. I got this from my friend, who's a doctor in the children's ward in a rural hospital.
The parents bring in their child whose hair is infested with lice. The lice were visible to the naked eye and could be seen crawling on the child's clothing. While the medical staff examined the child in order to determine a course of action, they discovered the child was covered in white powder and smelled heavily of chemicals. They asked the parents what were the substances and the smells emanating from the child. The parents said, quite matter of fact, it was 7 powder, and the flea and tick spray they used on their dogs on the family farm. Needless to say, social workers were notified about this case. 70-year-old female tripped and fell 2 days ago. She came up with hip pain, but reports after the fall her nose was bleeding. She had landed on her nose. About a year prior, her dentist had messed up an infraorbital nerve block and caused some swelling in that region, but that was all solved. This old lady is now convinced her nosebleed after falling on her face is related to an infection from the dental issue a year ago. After multiple back and forth on the etiology of the nosebleed, she became the first patient I raised my voice and put down an authoritative, "No, you're just wrong, just stop it." Work for an optometrist, and it was the month before school started, and a woman brought in her son to have his eyes checked for the first time. Seems like a pretty reasonable thing for any parent, even if he was a little older than usual for the first eye exam. Better late than never, I guess. The mum was well-spoken and appeared fairly intelligent. Everything went as normal, the doctor examined the boy and ended up prescribing glasses. When the doctor was explaining to the mum that her son had to wear his glasses all the time, since he's nearsighted and basically can't see clearly past 5 inches in front of him, and will definitely need glasses for school. For some reason, this caused a switch to flip in the mum, and she spazzed out on the doctor, saying that her son doesn't need glasses, that the doctor is only saying that he does because he wants to sell glasses. She says that she only brought her son in because there was some form for school that needed to be filled out, and the doctors are all con artists trying to push unnecessary medications and interventions. The doctor tried to calm her down and explain that he's only trying to help them, but that she was free to get a second opinion and give her kid a copy of the kid's prescription and sent them on their way. About 4 months later, the lady is back asking for another copy of the son's prescription. Apparently, the first semester midterm results were in, and her son had failed all of them because he couldn't see the board in his classes and needs, guess what, glasses.
Something similar happened with my mother when she was a kid. If I recall the story correctly, she was about 3, and she had always sat real close to the TV. My grandma kept scolding her for lying because she could see just fine. Well, Grandma got tired of hearing excuses and took my mom to the optometrist. The optometrist told her in no uncertain terms that she was nearsighted and needed glasses. My grandma was shocked at the news. Came back later to get the glasses, and on the way out, my mom just looks up at her mom and says, "Mommy, I can see you." My grandma just crumbled in tears at that.
Me, is there any chance you could be pregnant? Patient?
Definitely not.
Are you doing the deed with anyone right now?
Yes.
What is your preferred method of birth control?
Nothing.
Shoot me now. Any variation of this, which I get all the fricking time. Me. So how are things going with your diabetes? Them.
I don't have diabetes.
Then why are you taking metformin, Victoza, or whatever?
I used to have diabetes.
Then replace diabetes with hypertension, anti-hypersensitives, etc., or when I ask them what medical diagnosis they have and they say none while taking a ton of meds, or when they misname a body part, prostrate, tendant, uterus, to name a few. Oh hey, my doctor remembers all of my visits. That's nice. He was so good when he took out my inflamed appendix. Not a doctor, but I'm a nurse who worked in the OR at a trauma center. Was doing surgery on a 19-year-old substance user who tested positive for crystal and white snow, who was grilling the anesthesiologist about every drug we were going to use in surgery because he doesn't like putting chemicals in his body. Gotta stick with that organic, fair trade, non-GMO white snow. Oh, and on a similar note from the trauma center, guy is trespassing in a junkyard and gets his arms and legs screwed up by a pit bull. Have to clean out all these wounds. Flash forward to 3 a.m. that night, I get called in to do a case. Apparently the guy left the hospital AMA to go get revenge on the dog, and the dog bit him in the face, breaking some facial bones and poking a few more holes in the process. Classic. Most of my own stories go along similar lines to patient has chest pain driving a coachload of schoolchildren, thinks it's indigestion, swigs a bottle of Gaviscon, later diagnosed with huge heart attack. My favorite ever story from a colleague, a patient comes into A&E with abdominal pain. As part of the work, he gets an abdominal x-ray, which shows the problem as clear as day. The colleague then has proceeded to remove from the patient's rectum an 8-inch replica of Nelson's column, the statue in the centre of Trafalgar Square, London. On showing it to the patient, the response was, "Oh, that's Nelson. He lives up there." I've got 2 stories that stick out in my mind. The first is the mother of a toddler who came into the ER. The kid had cruddy green and bloody stuff coming out of his left nostril and a lot of redness and swelling of only the left side of his nose and the adjacent cheek. Mum was sure he caught a sinus infection and just wanted some antibiotics. Now, I know some kids like shoving whatever will fit into their body orifices, and that this was more than likely given the one-sided nature of his condition, but Mum was insistent that he never puts things in his nose. It took some convincing, but I finally got her to let me take a look. Gave a squirt of midazolam in the good nostril to settle him, then dug in with some tweezers through the crud until I pulled out a big old button battery. Would have been burning his nose for a couple of days. Hopefully, he healed up well. Side note, if a kid swallows a button battery, it can do similar things to their esophagus. This was an emergency and needs to be dealt with ASAP. When I was a medical student, I did an overnight ambulance ride-along. It was a slow night, so I was excited when dispatch called about what sounded like a stroke or a loss of consciousness. We zip over there, and the paramedic knocks on the door of a darkened house. A man opens the door slowly and says, "Oh yeah, she's in the back room." My sense of foreboding grew as we slowly made our way through the dim house, wondering what awful sight I would see back there. Just before we get to the back room, the light flicks on and this spry elderly woman practically bounces out of the room, carrying her bag of meds, cheerily saying, "Oh good, hello gentlemen, let's go to the dining room and I'll tell you what's been happening." She explains how she's on meds for high blood pressure, but instead of taking them as prescribed, she takes more or less depending on how she's feeling or something. Before bed, she took her BP on her home automatic machine, and it was a little high, so she kept repeating it and the numbers kept going higher and higher. She thought she was going to stroke out, so called 911. Of course, they were going up because she was freaking out about the previously high numbers, causing a vicious cycle. Even though both I and the paramedic knew she was more than likely fine, neither of us were doctors, so we had to take her to the hospital for assessment. So yeah, either she didn't understand her meds and the machine properly, or she thought she was too smart to follow her doctor's instructions. Patient had a hard time getting pregnant. Finally conceived, but miscarried. Patient has a D&C so she can try again, this time with medical intervention. We monitor her blood to ensure the pregnancy hormone has gone before beginning the treatment, but she keeps coming back with high levels of hormone. Docs are worried because she might have retained placenta or pituitary disorder, and this could be super bad for future fertility. We call her in for a conversation about the hormone levels not going away. After talking together about what might be wrong, they are going home and think about further tests. She says, "I need to go. I have an appointment at the weight loss center for an HCG shot." Turns out she is on the HCG diet. HCG is the pregnancy hormone. And this was after an hour of the doc saying, "We don't know why you have these constant high levels of HCG in your blood, and we're worried." Had a young woman with recurring UTIs that began after a recent partner and with no STDs. Went through the standard questions trying to figure out what could be causing them, and eventually found out she had been lubricating with jelly. Not KY jelly. The mix-up had literally been a joke in the house afterwards. It took me some effort to keep a straight face, but eventually we resolved the problem and she stopped getting UTIs. Oh dear sweet lord. Not only did she do this, but her partner must have at the very least just decided to go ahead anyway, or even worse, also thought it was a perfectly fine substance to use. Oh, I have two good ones that come to mind. Clinical pharmacist here, by the way, with one story in the ER and one in the pharmacy. ER physician told me this one. 16-year-old boy presented to the ER with an extremely swollen, discolored eggplant. Apparently, he's been using his mum's insulin needles to draw blood out of his arm and inject it into his own member. He thought that adding blood would help increase his size. His eggplant was terribly infected and he was hospitalized for a week or so. One day in the pharmacy, a girl comes to the counter requesting a refill for her birth control. We pulled up her profile and realized we couldn't refill it because she just got a 28-day fill less than 2 weeks ago. When we asked what happened to the other one, she said she was out. Apparently both her and her boyfriend were each taking a pill each, and was adamant that was how they needed to prevent pregnancy. I'm a corpseman, not a doctor, but I once had a patient tell me there was no credible research that smoking was bad for one's health. Okay. Optician here. We had a patient who refused to let us use the tonometer, a machine for checking ocular internal pressure to diagnose glaucoma. He said that puff machine gives you glaucoma, and we weren't going to pull that on him. He told us his father got an exam and had glaucoma after using that machine. His uncle and brother also had no signs of glaucoma, and after getting the puff test, both people had been diagnosed with the disease. Glaucoma doesn't have any outward symptoms before you start going blind. The moron just told me he has a very strong familial disposition to glaucoma and refused to be tested for it. Also, puff isn't that bad, guys. Try contacts. Your eyes stop fighting back pretty quick. The puff is a lot better than the old machine. It just hits you on the eyeball with a little ball on a lever. I've also had plenty of patients that don't understand family history. I interview patients directly so we don't have any real paperwork, and too many people can't answer simple questions. Do you or any direct families also have diabetes? Yes. Yourself or your family? Alternately, if yes to family members, they start listing their spouses, family, or stepchildren. That's not how genetic disposition works. After getting no answers to diabetes, hypertension, glaucoma, thyroid problem, heart problems, etc., I ask if they take any medications. Yeah, atorvastatin, thyroidazine, metformin, and low-dose aspirin. Oh, so you have everything I asked about. Check. You want some more? Way too many people don't understand presbyopia. As you age, your lens hardens and can't focus up close anymore. Of course, when this is explained, I get a lot of people who believe they're way too young for bifocals. No, 60 is not too young for bifocals. Why doesn't the doctor wear bifocals? He does. He's wearing progressives, you don't see the line. Or, after trying to get used to multifocal lenses for a few days, giving up and demanding we remake them as singular vision, and then getting mad at me when they can't read with them. I never needed bifocals before, why can't you just make me regular glasses? Regular glasses always worked just fine. Yeah, you used to be 20. Also, you came to see us because you can't read with your regular glasses. In the same vein, these same people complaining about their insurance to me because progressives are expensive. Aligned bifocal is covered entirely. Progressives cost a lot more. I can't have lines in my glasses like an old person. Then you want progressives. This easily triples the bill. Why are you so expensive? I need to be able to see. Yeah, you need a bifocal, you don't need a progressive, you want a progressive. Insurance pays for what you need, not want. I actually had a guy make me talk to his insurance agent about him needing medically necessary progressives. A progressive lens is never medically necessary. Stop being cheap and listen to what I say. I'm not a salesman, I'm a medical professional. Stop acting like you know better than me. I'm going to trust that this person is actually a medical professional here to rant with his colleagues because I don't understand half the words he said.
Oh, we've had a patient with cataracts tell us the optometrist was incompetent. She couldn't possibly have cataracts because she doesn't have cats. This was also the patient with 6120RE and 660LE, and binoc VAs tell us we were lying and just trying to sell him glasses. We weren't. It was a government-mandated acuities test and we aren't permitted to make sales off them. His logic, he hasn't been for a sight test in 17 years, so there's no way he needs glasses. He got back into his car and drove off. We've never sent paperwork back to the authorities so quickly. 80-plus-year-old patient who was declining with multiple diagnoses and about 3 decubitus ulcers. Daughter was adamant that her father be kept on his strict paleo diet because that would supercharge his healing. She had a stack of diet books. He simply wasn't getting enough nutrition to heal the ulcers. He didn't like the diet at all, by the way. At some point, you kind of have to stop being polite and just tell patients or family members bluntly that you don't have time for this crap and what you recommend and they can do what they want, and just document everything. It happens a lot, but she sticks out. Oh yeah, we had an elderly woman with severe malnutrition and her hippie daughter wanted us to only give her raw, unpasteurized goat's milk. We did everything we could to convince her that her mother wasn't getting enough nutrition. We even tried to allow her to bring in the raw, unpasteurized goat's milk that we would supplement with the FDA-approved formula that we wanted to give her mother through the feeding tube. We finally had to become pretty blunt with the daughter and let her know that her mother was going to die due to malnutrition due to the daughter's unique views on what was a proper diet for her mother. All the time. I'm a veterinarian and I can't tell you how many clients want to explain to me that their pet's illness can be fixed if they're fed a raw diet or a grain-free diet or fish oil supplements, whatever. Sure, come back to me when your dog's huge memory mass ulcerates and starts leaking pus everywhere and we can reevaluate how well her raw diet is working to fix that. I'm a dental student. One patient in particular is a pathological liar. During one visit, they claimed to have gone to medical school. Next visit that they did, dental army. Last visit was that they had a PhD. The patient will say things like, "Hey doc, do you need me to move my head mesial or distal?" "No, I need you to move your head right." "Hey doc, are these cavities being caused by the anaerobic pathology microbes?" "No, they're caused by you eating snacks all day and not brushing." Not my story, rather my colleagues. A patient was admitted for anemia and a localized cancer was found. She referred to surgery so that she can get cured from her localized cancer, and she just started telling everyone that it was the doctors who caused the cancer, and that she was doing just fine before coming to the hospital. She lectured the surgeon and my colleague who pleaded her to get her surgery so that the cancer doesn't advance, and yet she refused, saying she knew better and probably didn't even have cancer. ERRN here, not a physician, but you may find this interesting. Young adult male presents with multiple abscesses on various parts of his body. States he injected his boyfriend's splooge into himself trying to get pregnant. He tells one of the APCs he should have gone with his original plan and tried it on his dog first. The psych clears him. He's admitted to the floor and gets IV antibiotics. WTF. The things that we read for you, dear listeners. I hope that at least some of you enjoyed that because I need to go and evacuate my dinner, then cry about the state of the human race. Where to start? Here's just a few of my stories.
Picture a middle-aged man, his index finger is 5 times the size of the rest of his fingers. It smells, it's leaking pus, there's necrotic tissue, basically one huge infected, cancerous finger. He was a firm believer in not taking any sort of medication, including antibiotics or chemo. Died a few weeks later, but he did manage to tell us that we were all idiots before he passed away. Patient was a young child who came in with an extremely high blood glucose level. Once she was stable, we did some teaching and kept her for a few days of observation. For some reason, every time I checked her, her levels would be extremely high, although we were appropriately treating her. Turns out her family would bring her fast food for every meal and hide it in the side table. More teaching and resources were put into place. Had a mum in hysterics because she was convinced that her mother's, friend's, stepson's, teacher's dog has MRSA, so her baby was going to die. It took everything within me to not tell her that most of the hospital staff have MRSA, but it took 3 hours for me to finally calm her down after I called infectious control, her pediatrician, gynecologist, and family doctor. Yes, I had to call all of these people. Yes, they laughed at me. Yes, she was beside me the whole time, questioning their judgment. I love my job, but at times it makes me crazy. Not a doctor, but a gastro nurse. We had a recurring patient who was just a really very strange lady. She had a stoma that absolutely stank to the high heavens because the last 20 years she has not been cleaning it properly. Every single day her stoma would come off because she was twisting the drain tube and wouldn't allow us to change it. So this lady was really rude and would shout at us too, and one night shift I couldn't take it anymore and I snapped at her. I didn't yell, but I was overly stern about the fact that if she did not let me clean it and treat her stoma, then the MRSA that she wasn't able to get rid of because she refused Hibiscrub washes would eat her alive. In hindsight, I didn't handle that very well, but she let me change the stoma. So this entire ordeal, she's yelling at me that her stoma bags are not cut to fit her stoma, that they are too small because her stoma is 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters, to which I corrected her, saying that's impossible. She was adamant that's how big her stoma was. It was 30 millimeters in diameter. When I was cleaning the stoma, she yelled at me because it was hurting, so she just wanted to pop the new one on. I explained it was hurting because of her infection, because she never cleans it. She proceeded to tell me that she knows better because she's had the stoma for nearly as long as I've been alive. I eventually tell her to shut up and let me do my job, which seemed to work, and the stoma did not come off again that shift. When she was eventually discharged, she refused every placement to the point where we almost considered a court order to evict her. One of our F1s nearly cried with relief.
Redditors who lost their job because of a post to a social media platform. What happened? I've recently come into contact with a few people who lost their job over a Facebook-type social media outlet post, and it got me wondering, what kind of jobs take social media posts so seriously? I worked customer support for a mobile game company. I was honest with a disheartened customer who had complained that recent changes had made the game pay to win. It had, in truth, been a glitch with an update. I told them as much, assuring them the team would be fixing it in the next update. But then the game's profits skyrocketed. The team kept the glitch and put out a statement describing the change as an intentional one designed to improve the play experience. But there was my name, plastered all over the game forums, claiming the opposite. I technically worked for a separate company that provided support for several studios, but the studio behind this game was our biggest customer. They approached my bosses, furious that I jeopardized their cash cow, and demanded I be fired. I promptly became familiar with the underside of the bus as I was gone within the week. TLDR, worked customer support for mobile games, told truth, went viral-ish, fired. Didn't lose my job, but I watched a friend lose his over a tweet. He tweeted, "So getting head while delivering pizzas is pretty sweet," one night while he was working. The next morning, he tweeted, "Yo, screw you, Papa John's. I don't need you or your stupid job anyway," or something to that effect. I've never laughed so hard in my life. I used to work for Geek Squad in college, and a coworker was fired when a famous actor came in and she posted on Facebook a lot of his private info. Like full name came into her store and bought this and has a black Amex card and stuff he had on his computer. Not once, but on 2 separate occasions. Worked at GameStop until 2010. The store was in a mall, and parents would always lead their kids in the store and go do their shopping. Sometimes the children would cry, sometimes they'd pee themselves, even had one number 2. Parents would get mad at us for not bringing them to the bathroom, what the heck? Or start screaming at their kids for not just playing games for a few hours without causing any problems. I tweeted about how the store wasn't there to babysit children and never really thought about that tweet again. Until Few months later, same thing. Parent drops kid off in store, leaves. 20 minutes later, an older-looking guy is outside the store, on his flip phone, aiming it at the store. He's creeping me out, but I continue offering pointless warranties to customers while waiting for my next break, and then I noticed him walk near the entrance of the store and ask that kid where his parents are. This seemed really fishy, and the guy looked beyond suspicious. I was thinking he could be a kitty diddler, and I was right. He gets the kid to go with him, I call up mall security so they could check it out, and they caught him before he left the mall. He was arrested. The kid was crying, asking for his mom, who mall security could not reach because, as it turns out, she went to some stores outside of the mall area and she didn't actually come back for another 2 hours, at which point she threatened to sue me, GameStop, the mall, etc. Security guard lady told her that child services were called. They all walked away. That was the last time I saw them. Few days later, district manager, DM, shows up in store and I was fired on the spot because that lady made a complaint. DM found my Twitter and informed me that my approach to yesterday's dilemma and my tweet about how GameStop isn't a babysitting service has made them believe that I don't have the, quote, GameStop spirit. Both the manager and district manager told me I could use them as a reference on my resume though, which was great until they both lost their jobs a few weeks later. A former colleague of mine posted about how he was going to use up all his sick leave and then quit. He posted it at 9 a.m. He was told he had no more job at 11. I was working as a bartender and server for a place. The assistant manager was a petty tyrant and treated the staff like crap. I had made several complaints about him to the general manager and the owner with some of the other staff, but they refused to do anything about it. So I was done with this place and was currently looking for a new job when one day I was bartending and a very young-looking girl came. She hands me her out-of-state ID and I can tell that it is fake. I politely tell her that I can't serve her alcohol and explain that in this state we don't legally have to accept out-of-state IDs, blah blah blah. She was actually very understanding and there was no scene or issue. Her other friends arrive and they move to a table, and I inform their server about the fake ID. It is around this time that the assistant manager, who had been drinking Bloody Marys at the bar next door all morning and then napping in the office, came over. He then starts telling me that I don't know what a fake ID looks like and I don't have the right to refuse service and how stupid I am. He then tells me I have to serve the girl. I inform him that I have the legal right to refuse service and he cannot force me to. Anyway, I go home and post on Facebook about my day, and then include a photo of when I was managing a liquor store holding a device of medieval defense made out of all the fake IDs we had confiscated in 1 year. Also, a crown. The next day, I was called in and let go for refusing to cooperate with management and what have you. TLDR, got fired for posting a sweet picture of me wearing a crown and holding a shield of fake IDs. Not me, but the company I work for. A prospective employee just passed his interview and was told that all he needs to do is pass a drug test and a physical and he would start on Monday. The company Facebook guy found the new hire on Facebook and the guy had just posted 20 minutes after the interview, "Crap, anyone know how to pass a drug test in 24 hours?" I was younger and an idiot. I posted something on Facebook about wanting to go home and play The Sims so I could create telecommunications store I worked for on it and then slowly kill off all the customers. I was working a late night shift in a mall and forgot our new coworker had added me on Facebook days before. Joined a game studio alongside a guy who just finished his philosophy degree. He felt that the game's official forums were the best place to discuss whether disabled people would be, quote, of as much value as pigs after a post-apocalyptic event, and if they should be simply slaughtered and eaten, all using his company account, of course. I don't even know where to begin with this. I don't have the mental or physical capacity to give this guy the verbal beatdown he so desperately deserves. And probably physical beatdown too while we're at it. I was let go from the nation's third largest insurance company for what were called offensive tweets. Apparently, someone with my similar name was tweeting vulgar things to comedy accounts, and they brought me into HR and terminated me. Yes, I sued for wrongful termination so I could finish getting my MBA. I was once passed over for a job because I barely use Facebook. They straight up told me that they couldn't trust me because of how little info was on my page. For future reference, I'm sorry employers that 90% of my Facebook page is related to StarCraft and/or miscellaneous gaming. I'm sorry that I don't get drunk and post embarrassing photos of things you could fire me over. My personal life is my business and not Facebook's.
You must construct additional profiles. We require more discreditable posts.
A company I worked for had it written into their 7-page contracts that you were not allowed to even reference said company on social media. Anyone in breach would be fired instantly. There's a page on Facebook called We Hate Blank that's currently one of the world's biggest corporate hate pages. It all started when someone working in our call center posted online about how much the customers suck. They began something of a war between the staff and customers posting on employees' walls and vice versa. The company was/is a major player in its market, essentially had a monopoly, and there was a noticeable drop in sales that year. All in all, around 20 people were fired. I work in a hospital, and there was a police shooting in my area a couple of years ago, and multiple officers were brought into our ER. One officer was dead on arrival, and a number of idiot hospital employees posted condolences on their Facebook pages with the name of the officer before the family was officially informed. If memory serves, 7 or 8 employees were rightfully fired for that one. It's amazing to hear all of the healthcare blunders. I work in an ICU and saw a pretty messed up violation of patient privacy. A nurse was trying to contact the wife of a patient of ours, but somehow got his ex-wife. The ex-wife lost her mind on the nurse and started demanding information. When we finally got a hold of the wife, it turns out that the patient has a restraining order on the ex-wife due to a bunch of issues and told us not to release any information. We marked the patient as confidential so she wouldn't be able to find him. The ex-wife kept calling us saying she knew he was still in there, what room number he was in, and other information that we never provided her. We were wondering how the ex-wife knew all of this, and how her name was listed as the next of kin. It turns out that her friend worked in the admitting department in the same hospital, and she was the one that A, updated the contact information, she apparently checks on his patient file constantly, and B, kept logging into one of our systems and released his health information, such as tests he's had, results to lab work, and reading history/transfer/discharge reports once the ex-wife told her that he was admitted to our unit. They apparently did this all the time whenever the ex-wife found out that her ex-husband was in our hospital for any reason. After a couple days of proper investigation, the admitting clerk was let go and fined for improperly accessing patient information/release of information. She basically killed her career for her friend, as we basically only have one healthcare entity in our area. Not me, but a girl on my Facebook worked for the postal service in my town. She posted on Facebook how she wanted to slit her boss's throat and went into some pretty gory details. Then, about 5 hours later, she posted another status about how the feds showed up at her house and that one of her coworkers had showed her boss the status and she was now fired. She's obviously really dumb and trashy. I had to fire an employee for a tweet he wrote about a customer. He tweeted, "Customer's full name would be a great name for a gay adult film star." I found out about it when the customer's lawyer called me the next day threatening action. Turns out the guy worked for the local newspaper and obsessively searched his name on all social media. A little over a year ago, a bunch of employees at my old job got a rash. It wasn't contagious, our blood was clean, and the doctors were confused. I took steroids from day 1 and had it for a little over 2 weeks, I believe. I didn't even have it as bad as a couple people. Everyone continued to work, even though some people had it in exposed areas. Employees were itching and talking about it, but management did nothing. Even the manager had it, but the owner didn't, so he didn't care to take any action. Well, I posted a picture of my rash on Reddit and gave absolutely no information on where I worked. It got to the front page of r/WTF and a coworker saw it and obviously recognized it. He showed people because he thought it was funny, but there was a coworker already out to get me and she was close with our manager. So they told the manager that I had posted the picture on Facebook, which obviously would have been a big deal. So the manager told me to leave, but said she would have the owner meet with me. I knew as soon as I got home that she wasn't going to tell the owner to contact me. But I was already planning to quit the next weekend, so I didn't bother to meet with him. I am not working at a place that allows the majority of their staff to get a rash and not investigate it. I should probably add that this was a restaurant. Not me, but my mom's ex-boyfriend. He was a waiter at a very elite restaurant and had normally expected very nice tips. Some guy left him a $5 tip for an over $100 bill and he got angry and posted the customer's information on Facebook. He got fired the next day. Wow, this blew up. It seems some people are making some pretty bad assumptions. So he was actually a very good waiter. High-end restaurants really wanted him. It probably went to his head at some point because he started to pick up a drinking/staying out late after work habit. He started having some issues with my mom as well, and they became roommates only. My mom moved out and he got really stressed, and I heard from his prior manager that he started getting strikes at work. He also frequently ranted on Facebook about bad customers. A while later, he posted the customer's info on Facebook and was fired. From what I know now, he's got a job at a bar, but is still drinking. He wasn't a bad guy by any means. He just started losing himself and making really bad choices. My mom still keeps in contact with this family, but from what I hear, it's still bad. I had to fire someone for one. He was a volunteer firefighter and left for a call, which I allowed. 15 minutes later, someone showed me his 5-minute-old post of him riding quads, saying something along the lines of, "Sometimes you just need to F off from work." That put him on a final warning. He then left because he said his house was on fire. Then half an hour later, his wife tagged him in a photo of him sitting in a kiddie pool in front of the house. The funny thing is, in both cases, if he had simply asked to leave early, I probably would have said yes. To clarify, this was over a few different days, a few weeks apart, and he worked for me, but also volunteered as a firefighter. The fire chief also found out about this and dismissed him from that position as well. This guy had a few issues, needless to say, and honesty was not something with which he was familiar. My dad was in a similar position. The guy asked to leave early, my dad said yes. Then a half hour later, the guy posted that he was in the emergency room. We later learned that it was because he tore his urethra after he stuck a screwdriver in there. Edit. It was a Phillips. Oh my god, why is that so important to everyone? Okay. Reddit? Hi. It's me, the guy reading these posts. Don't stick things in your dingling where they don't belong. I remember reading about a guy who shoved a caulk gun up there one time, and I still cringed just as hard. So dingling havers of Reddit, please take care of yourselves because I don't want to have to read more about your trauma. It costs $0 to be nice to yourself. My female friend, 18, was DM'd through Twitter by the news presenter, 37, of our city. He was talking about her beach pictures and how she is really pretty and how they need to get together. She ended up telling him that it's pretty ridiculous that he's trying to get with her. He lost his job later that week. The only real reason he lost his job was because he used the Weather Channel's Twitter account. Oh, this happened to me many years ago. I was on the job a week at a law firm and had to ride with one of the female employees to the UPS store. She was a terrible driver and almost wrecked multiple times. I posted on Facebook, 1 week on the job and my coworker is trying to kill me. Worst driver ever. The next day, I was called into my boss's office with the girl sitting there with an expressionless look on her face, and there was a printout of my post. It was awkward and they fired me on the spot. All of my account information was also set to private, so they figured out a way to check my activity. Former Chipotle manager here. As many of you know, Chipotle gives away free crap on Halloween. So it's a mandatory weekend for everyone to work. Well, one of our employees called off that Thursday saying he had swine flu. Right. Of course, he posted pictures of his weekend partying on his Facebook, upon which he was friends with our kitchen manager, general manager, and district manager. Per company policy and common freaking sense, you can't return to work from serious contagious stuff without a doctor's note. So he shows back up on Wednesday acting all fine and saying the doc cleared him. Oh, but his mom threw his release note away. Too bad, buddy. We need that crap or you can't work. Since we didn't know when he would have it, we only gave him 1 day on the schedule anyway. So then his mommy calls me and asks why he can't work. I ask her, if she went to a restaurant and found out a cook hadn't proven he was clear from having swine flu, would she eat there? She saw my point. But it's not his fault she threw away the note. They were remodeling. I asked, why can't the dog write a new one? Well, he went on vacation. Couldn't the receptionist or a PA get them something? She huffed and hung up on me. The next day he puts on Facebook, Dear Chipotle and managers, instead of cutting hours on someone, why not grow the freaking balls to fire them outright? Suck my dingaling. Pretty easy to let him go after that. I got fired from an internship for posting on Reddit before. It was a very small environmental engineering consulting firm. We were doing work on a site that had lead and arsenic contamination on it. The site was very dusty, and if it didn't rain for a few days, the dust would often kick up and blow onto the street next to the site, which happened to be the main road in this semi-smallish town. Someone mentioned on Reddit, in a totally unrelated way, that they were from this town. I made a mention of the contamination and told the dude that if he ever saw dust coming off the site that he should contact the engineers which were housed above one of the local bars. Apparently, this guy didn't really want the site to be redeveloped at all because of the already high congestion in the surrounding roads, and he called and complained and mentioned my post on Reddit. The company was so small, it was obvious it was me who posted it, and I fessed up about what I had said, and immediately deleted the post. Even though I didn't do anything illegal or even remotely immoral, I was fired because I was seen as a liability. Screw that. People deserve to know if the dust they're breathing in could give them cancer. I moved on to a different field, marine biology, and haven't even remotely looked back. Content warning, good old-fashioned racism ahead. A girl I know was a nurse at a hospital and got fired for posting things on Facebook such as, "So sleepy here in the ICU. Will someone please code and give me something to do? Hashtag, is that bad? I'm not trying to offend anyone, but I have to ask. Is it like a Native American custom not to take a dump at home? Is it like an offense to their husbands to dump at home? Every time I go into a public bathroom and it smells like someone died in there, a native is washing their hands. Literally every single time. Like, lay off the Navajo tacos." The dumbest part about it was she was tagging the hospital she worked at in her posts. If you have to start your post with, "I'm not trying to offend anyone, but," there's a good chance you're probably going to offend someone. Or just straight up be offensive under the guise of asking questions. I remember hearing a story about a young teacher in my province getting fired for posting vacation pictures to Facebook. Bikini, margaritas. A dipstick parent or teacher reported it, as any uptight group of PTA mothers would want to defend young eyes from that. "Oh, we can't have our children gazing upon such heresy. Having fun, enjoying yourself, it brings torment to the soul. Oh!" I didn't get fired, but I did get written up for a post on Facebook. It was about 5 years ago at my old job. Spring just started, and it was the first day it was in the 60s. On lunch, I posted something like, "What a beautiful day. Can't wait to get out of work and enjoy it." Well, that didn't go over well. Funny thing is, I wasn't Facebook friends with anyone from work. They had one guy that would creep on people's Facebooks. This is when I learned about privacy settings. He told the boss, and I got pulled in the office. They basically asked why I didn't like my job and why I couldn't wait to get out of work. I was like, it's the first warm day in what feels like 6 months. Of course I want to be outside. The reason I got written up was because I was, quote, on Facebook at work, even though I was on lunch. Bunch of idiots worked at that place. It's kind of surprising how delusional bosses are. "Oh no, he might want to get off work and enjoy a nice day. Call him in! We must investigate what it means to be human!"
Have you ever found yourself in a very dangerous situation suddenly easily solved by someone else? 2 days ago, I was picking up my lunch at McDonald's. It was rush hour, so I'm just searching for a free seat, and I found one near to a huge guy, suit-dressed. He was not fat, just huge. So I'm eating and just looking absently at people in the room, thinking about my job, my life, and banging, of course. I saw the usual folks you'd expect to find at a fast food. Suits, moms and kids, guys, and the omnipresent D-bag. Hat, tank top, overdeveloped biceps, tattoos, absurd tan. You know, the Jersey Shore kind of stereotype. The D-bag was with his female trophy. Great body, but her face was ugly as a kick in the mouth. Jesus Christ, I can't find words to say how she was ugly. She reminded me of Picasso. So I continue looking around while eating, and I may have crossed my look with the D-bag and his trophy a couple of times for nanoseconds. The giant rose, and while he was picking his tray, the D-bag yelled at me, "What are you looking at?" I was like, me? The D-bag stood up and yelled at me again, "What the frick are you looking at?" Suddenly, the giant, with the tray in one hand, turns around to see what's happening and approaches the D-bag, puts one hand on his chest and slams him back into his seat, then points a finger at him and says, "Shut the frick up, idiot." The giant takes a quick look at the girl, turns back to me and says, "Yeah, man, what are you looking at here? Just a fake chest, nothing more." Another quick angry look at the D-bag, then the giant proceeds to the trash can with his tray. The D-bag grabs his mortified girl and quickly rushes to the door, and I'm still at the table with a Coke in my hand and the WTF look unchanged. Don't know exactly how that happened, don't know who the giant was, but my Big Mac was a little cold, that's all. Well, I think we can agree that every man in this story, including the author, is a terrible person and move on to the rest. I worked as a chef in a very nice restaurant in Cleveland, Ohio in the mid-1980s. I was located near a very bad neighborhood and some of our dishwashers lived in that neighborhood. I was a young, white kid from the suburbs and one of the dishwashers was a black man in his late 30s named Harold, who went by Hurl. No idea why. Anyway, Hurl and I became friends. He was a rather jovial guy and he was interested in cooking, so I taught him a few things and eventually got him promoted from dishwasher to cook. He was actually quite good and loved the new job, and me for helping him out. One day he asked me if I wanted to go out and party with him after work. Being young and adventurous, I took him up on his offer and into the neighborhood we went. For those of you familiar with Cleveland, it was the Howe Avenue neighborhood. We eventually ended up in an after-hours club, which is where all the drunk people ended up when all the bars were closed. I was wandering around a smoke-filled room with lots of very seedy-looking people, and I was quite drunk myself at the time. I ended up in a corner somewhere, surrounded by a small gang of people wondering who I was. They started closing in on me, and one of them asked if I had $1 I could give him. I felt my skin get clammy, and I realized I was about to get jacked by some drunk guys in a bad neighborhood. Suddenly, Hurl shows up, looks at the guy asking me for $1 and says, "He with me." Hurl has a look on his face I've never seen before, a lot more menacing than anyone in the gang surrounding me. The gang immediately changes their tune and suddenly I'm their friend, and one of them asks me if I'd like a beer, and offers me one he has been drinking. I respectfully decline and Hurl and I move away. Hurl looks at me, still with that menacing look, and says, "Anyone come up to you in this hood, you tell them you with Hurl. They know me, and they know I don't play. Good to know." This was in Karachi, Pakistan in the late 90s. We were at my uncle's place who was renovating his house. He had a small cement mixer set up behind the house, which was taking up some of the alley. Usually, when someone is building a house, the cops will show up and say the mixer is illegal and ask for a bribe to turn a blind eye. Problem is, on this particular day, pretty much all the cops started showing up one by one. Each one would say, "Pay us more and no one else will bother you." And a few minutes later, a new police van would show up saying the same thing. We had enough and stopped paying them. This teed off one of the cop vans and a couple of officers showed up at our door. We kids opened it and the officer asked us to come with him. He took us to the end of the valley where 5 to 6 cops were standing, AK-47s drawn. We all crapped bricks while the officer kept saying, "Why won't your parents pay? Why won't your parents pay?" Things were not looking good. Luckily, one of our neighbors saw the cops rounding up kids and walking us away. He was a big shot in a major gang. He left his house, got on his motorbike and drove over to where we were stood. Told the cop, "Let them go, if you know what's good for you." The cops left. No one bothered us again until the construction was done. Another Karachi story in the same vein. Every now and again there's a general strike in Karachi, which is enforced by local gangs. By enforced, that means they'll gun down anybody who leaves their houses. It's not always that bad, but this is the threat. During one of these strikes, my uncle's aunt, not the same uncle as the last story, fell sick and had to be taken to hospital, which was right around the corner from my uncle's place. You could walk to it. My uncle was at the hospital all day looking after her and decided to head home in the afternoon. Streets were deserted and he made haste. When he was literally 20 meters from his home, a gang of bikers saw him, chased him and cornered him. They asked why he was out during the strike and he tried explaining. They'd have none of it. They had their weapons leveled at him while he backed up against the gate to his neighbor's home. He banged at their metal gate for help, but who the hell would come out in that situation? Suddenly, a car drives by, black with tinted windows. A window rolls down and says, "Let this one go." Bikers left. Uncle sprinted for his house, got in, and started shaking uncontrollably. And that's how we found him and he told us this story. Chef-related story. My mother and father used to own a restaurant in San Francisco. It was south of Market at a time when that was an exceptionally bad area. They hired this really nice Mexican guy, Juan, to wash dishes and do work in the kitchen. They were, however, down a chef, the previous one quit all of a sudden, and hired this new guy on short notice. So it's the first day, the restaurant starts to fill up for lunch around 11:30 or so. Normally a number of dishes would be prepped for the first few people coming in for lunch. But this guy, in spite of his frantic running around the kitchen, had nothing ready. So my mother walks into the kitchen and says, "Hey, what's the deal?" The guy tells her aggressively that he's getting the stuff ready. Wait another 40 minutes, still no one had gotten their meals. My mother walks back into the kitchen and this guy reels around with a butcher knife, walks up to her and waves it in her face, says, "Get the frick out of my kitchen." The next thing, Juan, who'd been watching this exchange, bends down to his boot, pulls out a carving knife, grabs the chef by the throat, and pushes him up against the stove. The guy drops the butcher knife and pretty much craps himself. He then runs out of the restaurant, swearing everyone to heck. My mother, after crying a few minutes, realizes that she's screwed because she has no one to cook lunches for the 70 or so people waiting. Juan says, "Do not worry," puts on an apron and cooks up all the lunches with lightning speed. And they were great lunches. I had one of them. The chef came back a few weeks later apologizing. He said it had a really bad white snow habit that he was now dealing with. Juan was employed from that day on as head chef. Good old Juan. Total bamf. I don't miss working with some chefs and the insane substance-induced problems that would arise because of those particular guys. I got cornered for a beating in a new high school surrounded by about 20 kids. This one kid who I met a day earlier casually walked along a fence rail through the crowd and swiftly kicked the lead kid in the face. End of story. Saved me from a beating like he was James Dean. Never got to thank him. A guy who was harassing me in a bar got ejected. I learned he waited outside to attack me. Another patron apparently witnessed what went on in the bar, saw the guy laying for me, and sucker punched him. When I was about 14, it was summer and we lived by the sea. My dad had a dinghy in the loft from the 70s along with paddles, and me and a guy called Peter H. took it out down the beach. Minus paddles. Bad idea. We went with Peter's brother and were carefree messing about in the dinghy when we realized we were drifting out to sea. We got out, started paddling and trying to swim back and couldn't touch the bottom. We kept trying in vain and in the end realized we were screwed. This was the northeast coast of England in the North Sea. Temperature was about 4 degrees. We shouted to his brother on the beach, now about 150 meters away, to get help. Unbelievably, some guy walking on the beach stripped down to his pants and swam out. Dropped everything and swam out. He came to us, grabbed the boat that we were clinging to, and swam us back to shore. We got dry next to some fishing boats and lent him a towel before saying thanks. I genuinely believe he got us out of a lot of trouble, and I never even got to find out his name. I was working in a specialty running shoe and vitamin store, and this guy came in and walked around for a while, just kind of looking at different things. Said he didn't need help when I asked him about it. About 15 minutes later, when the store clears out, he comes up to the front counter and pulls out a fairly large knife and demands the money out of the cash register. Being 17 at the time and feeling a half panic, half anger, I started to talk loudly. "All right, I'll give you the money, don't hurt me," hoping that the cashier at the store next to mine would hear and call the police. The walls were thin and would mess with each other as such. My dad's friend is a cop in the town and every so often will randomly show up at work to mess with me. Sometimes this comes in the form of pretending to do a SWAT raid through the back door, which was directly behind the register. I don't lock the door while I'm working, so my boss usually just stopped by 2 to 3 times to walk in and check something and leave. This time, my dad's friend just strolls in yelling something about terrible service and what a bad employee I am. Sees the guy with the knife out and pulls out his service weapon. Guy drops knife, gets arrested. The one day I'm incredibly happy that my dad's friend comes in to screw with me. That must have been confusing for everyone that heard that. "Man, this service is terrible. Get to the ground! You're under arrest!" I was at Pismo Beach in California, about 13 years old at the time, boogie boarding and not really paying attention to the fact that the current had been pushing me closer and closer to the pier. I guess I figured when I start getting too close, I could just easily swim away and that would be that. When I realized that I was going to be slammed into the mussel and fishing hook encrusted pillars soon if I didn't start moving away, I began to swim the opposite direction. This is when I realized that swimming against the current is much harder than swimming with it. I started paddling furiously and began panicking because I wasn't making any progress. With each wave, I was being pushed closer to the pier. It would just be a couple more cycles before I started bouncing around underneath the pier. That's when I noticed a man standing in the water next to me. It was about waist deep. Feeling like an idiot, I slid off my board, stood up, and walked to shore. When I was in high school, I worked at the local video store. It was a small town and everyone knew one another. Anyway, these 2 thuggish black guys who were the main smack or white snow dealers for the hood would come into the store once a month and intimidate me into getting rid of their late fees because they never bought anything back on time. My boss finally caught on and told me that I couldn't do that anymore, no matter how scary they were. So they show up a week later expecting me to waive their fees. I explained to them that I could potentially get fired, but I would do it for them one last time. They actually understood and were appreciative. As they were walking out, they gave me their pager number and said that if I ever needed anything, to call them, and I assumed they meant I could call them for green herb, white snow, or whatever else they dabbled in. So I just kind of ignored it and went about my life. Flash forward a few months and I'm hooking up with this girl who had just broken up with her super redneck boyfriend. Mr. Redneck was not pleased when he found out about the situation. He showed up at the video store one night with some moron friends and informed me they would be waiting for me in the parking lot and they were going to beat the crap out of me after I closed the store for the evening. I still had several hours before close, and as time went by, several more truckloads of rednecks showed up. I was really starting to sweat. There were 15 to 20 dudes just waiting to teach me a lesson. It seemed there was no way to get out of this beating. Out of sheer desperation, I paged the scary drug dealer guys. They called me back pretty quickly. I explained what was going on and asked if they could help me out. They told me not to worry, they'd be there shortly. I didn't know what to expect. I continued my closing duties while I waited for them to show up. Once I turned the lights off to the store, the mob in the parking lot started getting riled up. They were yelling and taunting me through the windows. I had run out of things to do in the store, and the dudes I had paged still hadn't shown up. As I was setting the alarm and mentally preparing for a demoralizing butt-whooping, a procession of hoop ties pull into the parking lot and circle the trucks. I watched from the windows as the dealers and their friends pulled out guns and told the rednecks in no uncertain terms that I was not to be messed with. To this day, I have never seen people scramble so fast. There were literally tire marks in the parking lot from all of the trucks peeling out to get away. This one event led to me never being screwed with again by anyone in my hometown. It was pretty nice. I could talk all the crap I wanted with impunity since everyone was so scared of those guys. Good times. In conclusion, multiple rednecks wanted to beat the crap out of me over a girl, and scary substance dealers saved me. I wonder if he resumed waiving their late fees after that particular incident. Car wreck on my way to school a few years ago. My little Honda Civic versus a large semi-truck. I blacked out for a short period. When I realized what happened, I couldn't get my car door open. The window on my side was slightly open from the crash, and I started panicking, thinking the car is going to explode or something. Random stranger next to the car goes, "Calm down, try the other door." So I climb over the center console and get out of the car. How about a non-human stranger? I was about 8 or 9 walking home from school. About a block from my house, some random pit bull runs up to me and starts growling. Scared the crap out of me. I figure I'm at death's door when out of nowhere another dog came to my aid. I believe it was a German Shepherd. This dog ran to my side and started barking at the pit bull until it left. I don't know this dog and I don't believe I ever saw him or her again. It was a pretty surreal situation. No crap, the exact same thing happened to me. We had a German Shepherd Husky mix, greatest dog in the world, and one day I was playing outside on my big wheel or something when the neighbor's pit bull came running after me. Sebastian came out of nowhere and tackled the other dog before it could get to me. He ended up getting pretty hurt, needing stitches and whatnot, but he scared the pit bull back to the neighbors and most likely saved my life and my face. My parents say that from that point on, he never let me or my siblings out of sight when we were outside. I was riding a bus in Brooklyn. I was trying to get some new bus routes instead of the subway because they could often be faster. I was going up into a very rough part of Brooklyn, basically Eastern Bedford, Stuyvesant. I was going to where the bus crossed the subway line. I'm the only white guy on a bus full of black people, which in itself was not unusual. An old guy sitting on the bus walks over to me and says, "You need to get off the bus now. You can't go further. It's not going to end well for you." I don't know if he saw something specific or was speaking in general. He was sincere. I got off the bus and walked a few blocks to catch a transfer from there. My family and I were the only ones on a deserted beach in Florida. I was being stupid and about 11, decided to swim a little far from the beach and get caught by an undertow. I remember the desperate, futile feeling of swimming harder towards land but seeing it get further and further away. Since only now my family was there and my parents weren't good at swimming, I was a goner. Out of nowhere came a strong swimmer, told me to calm down, gave me a flotation device, and swam me back to the beach. Before I could properly thank him, he disappeared. I had recently moved to the Columbia Heights neighborhood in northwest DC a few years ago, and for those who don't know, the Columbia Heights was really bad about 10 years ago, but is in the process of gentrifying. The neighborhood is pretty culturally and racially diverse, and I could afford it. One day I was walking home from work and was about 2 blocks from my house but slightly off the beaten path on a mostly empty street. I had my earbuds, which isn't always the safest thing to do just because you can lose situational awareness. I also had a laptop bag with no laptop, which again isn't all that smart. Anyway, a dude is walking toward me on the sidewalk and is around my age. We make eye contact and he says something unintelligible to me and I say something like, "Sorry," assuming I was either in his way or he was begging. I notice he has bloodshot eyes and if I had to guess, this was probably a smackhead. I angle my body towards him as we pass each other and the next thing I know he is grabbing for my earbuds. He pulls them out of my ears but doesn't quite get them as I jump back. I'm sort of in shock, but I've been in fights before, but not when I had no build up to the moment. I think I yelled something like WTF, and as he was coming at me again, I was thinking I probably could take the guy, but I should try to avoid blood, hitting his teeth with my fists. I don't know why my first thought here was risk of hepatitis, rather than maybe that I should just run my butt away, which would have been much smarter. But as he comes at me again, some unseen man is in front of me and pushes the dude away. Smackhead then stands his ground, and damn if the man doesn't just push him again and then starts yelling at him to get the frick out of the neighborhood and berating him over and over. Smackhead turns toward Main Street and begins to move quickly away. The man is yelling, loudly, at him the whole time, echoing off the nearby houses. I'm kind of just staring at this point as the adrenaline is coursing through me. At that moment, suddenly a little girl, maybe 3 to 4 years old, on a tricycle rides past me in the same direction as the man, and the smackhead, opposite direction that I was heading. She is just following her daddy, the man who saved me, like it's the most normal thing in the world. Most surreal thing that I've ever experienced. I just sort of watch as the three of them head back to the main street. I never got a chance to say thanks. I was the stranger once, in Toronto at the Yonge and Egg subway stop, mother and her 2 kids standing fairly back from the edge. Trains coming in pretty fast when one of the kids bolts straight for the tracks, like an idiot. My back's turned, but I hear the mum scream. I turn around and see the kid out of the corner of my eye. On instinct, I grab him and happen to just get him right in the front of the shirt and hoist him about 5 feet off the ground in half a second, just as the train flies by with the horn blaring. It was pure luck, but I played it cool and handed him over to his mother, trying to sound suave. "Is this yours?" Raised eyebrow. Funny thing that she didn't even seem that grateful. Maybe the kid has prophesied to end the world or something, in which case I'd like to apologize to you all in advance. I didn't know. There's lots of mysterious strangers in the last few posts. One wonders if any of them are the same superhero. I was drinking with a friend and his younger brother. My friend had recently finished his enlistment from the Marines, and we were out celebrating. His younger brother ended up having words with a gangster white rapper wannabe. It escalates into, "Let's take this outside." We go out into the parking lot, more words and chest puffing. Mini Eminem pulls out a gun and points it at my friend's younger brother. I'm like, crap, and my butthole tightens up. However, my friend walks up to the guy, slaps him in the face, and says, "Put the piece away, you dumb idiot, and go home." Guy puts the gun up and leaves. I was doing a show at this wretched comedy club in Brockton, Massachusetts. There was a drunk chick who would not stop talking, so after a few polite back and forths, I say something along the lines of, "Will someone stick an eggplant in her mouth and shut her up?" Note, this is an old, crappy thing to say, but it usually works, and like I said, it was Brockton. That does the trick and she's quiet for the rest of the show. I finish my set and come off stage. I'm walking out to the front room of the club and suddenly I'm aware of an enormous shape coming toward me. It was the hosebag's boyfriend and he's got like 8 inches and 100 pounds on me, and he's teed off. He shoves me into the front room and is doing a whole pre-fight, "Why you talking about my girl that way?" chest bump kind of thing when suddenly 3 dudes just kind of sweep into the room. They're all built like fire plugs and wearing matching skin-tight Adidas workout shirts like some kind of working-class superhero team. One of them closes the doors to the showroom and blocks them. Another goes and stands by the front door like he's standing guard or something, while the third gets between me and the big dude who says, "What the frick, man? You want to fight?" And the guy says in the calmest, coldest voice, "Yeah, I do. Let's fight." Something in the way he says it totally takes the steam out of the big dude. He just backs right down like, "Nah, man, it's cool. We're all cool here." And then my mean little savior goes, "This guy was hilarious. Your girlfriend's a C-word, and you owe him an apology and a beer." And the big guy nods and goes and gets me a beer, before going back into the show with his tail between his legs. Turns out these guys were off-duty Brockton Vice cops. Totally saved my stupid moron self. Educators, have you ever had a real genius in class? What made him or her so smart? When I was student teaching, I had a work-study gig at a wraparound program in my city. It was half tutoring, half daycare for students that needed a place to go between that time when school ended but before their parents got home. While it was mostly populated by middle and high school students, there were a handful of very young children as well, 5 to 6 years old. One very little girl, she couldn't have been older than 6, was probably 5, approached me with a box of chess. She didn't know how to play, but said her father played and she wanted to learn how. I'm not a chess expert, but I've played a good amount of times and read a few books, and I can beat my friends or a hard computer. To clarify that, I'm talking about the hard setting on my phone. It's about 1500 ELO. I'm somewhere above that, but probably not by much. I met with this little girl for about 30 minutes every day. In 2 days, she understood all the rules and could play competently. At the end of the week, she tied the game in a stalemate. At the end of the second week, I never won again. Turns out she was the daughter of a professor at my college, and he was an internationally ranked chess player. When I ran into him, he couldn't thank me enough for teaching his daughter chess, as his wife had issued a decree that he wasn't allowed to teach or play or mention chess around their daughter. Understandable, didn't want to pressure her or discourage her. Chess was in these people's genes, man. I teach a university-level writing course for people who typically aren't in writing-heavy majors, math, science, etc. It's hard to make a 100 in a writing course for anyone, because even great writers do something wrong in papers sometimes. A missing citation, argument could be more nuanced, rush through conclusion, etc. All mistakes that will at least take you from a 100 to a 98 or something. This kid made a stone-cold 100 on every paper. Like, I literally couldn't find anything wrong in any of them. That is bizarre for even great writers. I've never felt more worthless as a teacher because there was just nothing I could suggest to improve unless I started making stuff up. I found out later that he had a 100 in all of his classes that semester, including some really difficult upper-level STEM ones. I don't know if he was a genius, but he's probably the closest I've had, and I wonder if having a 99 average would feel like a disappointment to him. My ex taught primary school, and she gave her class a weekly spelling test and said anyone who bettered their score from last week would receive a chocolate. Most kids got 15 or above out of 20, except for one kid who got 0. She said all the other kids had made fun of him, as kids would, but he was strangely calm about it. Didn't get stressed from the teasing, as most kids would. Next test, he got 1. Same ordeal, but received a chocolate as per the rules. Next week 2, then 3, then 4, receiving a chocolate each week. I didn't fathom a 10-year-old kid could conduct something so cunning. This was an odd 15 years ago, wouldn't be surprised if he was super successful now. Smart kid, but I'm not sure that the right lesson was being taught to him. I have taught at university level for decades and have certainly come across some very smart kids. High success most often correlates with an element of obsession and work ethic. There are, however, 2 students out of the 10,000 plus I have taught who stand out. Student 1 was deeply obsessed with his area of study and just about anything else. He rarely went to the lectures he had signed up for and could be found sitting in the back of classes of every subject you could imagine. He was a socially very engaged person whose enthusiasm was exhausting. His final GPA was very mediocre, a fact that did not bother him in the slightest. He had no interest in the minutiae of undergraduate study. He was working at a PhD level and beyond in his final undergraduate year, sucking every bit of information out of his professors. He ultimately became a high-tech multimillionaire. Student number 2 may be what you're looking for and is the only example I've encountered. This was a very shy and humble young man who took a long time to get to know, but was very engaging once you did. He came from a working-class family with no history of higher education and worked long hours at McDonald's. The first thing I noticed was the truly extraordinary quality of his work, effortlessly solving problems that previous students had not even come close to solving. His ability to pick up complex ideas and even extend them was unrivaled. Other professors reported the same. Pressures of work and many other problems resulted in him not turning up to class often, but he would still ace the course. In his final term, he did not attend a single class of any subject. He simply turned up for the final exam and midterm. He won the undergraduate gold medal for the university. He sadly now is socially dysfunctional, unemployed, and has been in trouble with the law. I always felt the system did not serve him well. I'm not sure about genius, but I'm currently teaching a very bright student in a class that is supposedly remedial. His home life is horrible and his behavior presents a serious challenge. But he can skim my notes before a lesson and completely understand it. To keep him engaged, I will sometimes ask him to help me explain a concept, and he can do it just as well, if not sometimes better than I can. He's gotten a 100% on every test and quiz that we've had this year. I asked the principal why the student is in the class that he's in, and he said that administrators won't put him in advanced classes because his behavior is distracting others. I've recommended this student for advanced classes next year, and I have an assistant principal on my side now. We're working with him on his behavior, which has shown improvement, especially in the past few weeks. High school history teacher here. The genius student I had didn't open the textbook once, took very little notes, came to review sessions, yet sat attentively and answered every question I asked aloud correctly. Showed up to all my tests with just a pencil and would be first to finish nearly every time. Only question he ever got wrong was a bonus one in my first month of teaching that asked the students to correctly spell my last name, as the majority never call me anything but Miss. Fantastic all-round kid too. Athlete, in the musicals, social, loved by all. Got into every college he applied for. Michael was 7 when I met him, and what set him apart was his ability to direct his own learning, his well-rounded intelligence, and his genuine love of learning. He was in my 3rd grade class, and it was clear right away that he was smart. Could do any math we gave him, spell anything, reading on a higher level than we tested for. And I teach in a town that's pretty pretentious about its kids. Very high socioeconomic level, tons of kids go to Ivy Leagues, many parents think their kid is a genius. Michael's mum knew he was smart, but didn't seem to get how smart. But he was never the kind to show off or want to impress people. He loved learning and was so excited to share it with everyone. Some noteworthy things he did: taught himself about the stock market. His mum wouldn't let him invest money, so he invested theoretical amounts and then showed her what it would have earned. Came in with an autobiography of George Bush to read during the silent reading. Not a kid version, the official biography. He was able to tell me about it and commented that he disagrees with Bush politically, but felt bad for him because he thought he was pushed into politics by wanting to live up to his dad, but wasn't happy in it. Noticed some languages have similarities, so started mapping out how he thought they were related. This was in 2nd grade. In 3rd grade, he showed me his map and I told him about language family trees, and he was so excited. He got really into language isolates and wanted to learn Basque. Related to this, he made himself flashcards of Greek and Latin roots to help his spelling and vocabulary. Taught himself hexadecimal and binary and was working on other computer languages. He was incredibly socially intuitive and empathetic. He would say to me, "I think so-and-so is upset," and the kid in question would be fine. Inevitably, before the day ended, that kid would have a meltdown or ask to talk to me about an issue. I learned fast to trust Michael's judgment. This also made him a really great friend. He did it with me too. He'd ask if I was okay and I'd be having a really rough day. It was so strange but sweet to have this tiny kid say things like, "Let me know what I can do to support you today." Oh, and I've thought of another. He was also musically very gifted, taught himself some instruments, and could identify pretty obscure musical pieces by ear. He moved at the end of the year and I lost touch. It was so great getting to be his teacher. It's cheesy, but I learned so much about how to teach and support gifted students by working with him. As someone who basically speaks 1.5 languages despite working in both for many years, I'm incredibly envious of just this kid's talent for picking languages up. Wow. I'm a former teacher. Geniuses just know things. There's not much you can teach them in today's schools because they're so far ahead of the rest of the class that you can't teach them and the rest of the students at the same time. I had a student who reads books in class. If I asked her to explain what I had just said, she explained it perfectly without looking up from the book. Some students complained about her making A's while reading books in class while they listened and didn't make A's. I couldn't help that. She was bored in class. I could waste classes' time scolding her, or I could leave her alone. I teach French, and I think I currently have one in my French 4 class. This kid is insane. Knows stuff that I've never explicitly taught, demonstrated on in-class assessments, so no Google Translate happening here. She's also not the cheating kind of kid. She masters difficult grammatical concepts without even needing to practice them. All I have to say is, this is how and why you use the subjunctive, and she gets it. Perfectly. Every time. In speech, in writing, everything she does is meticulous, well thought out, and above and beyond what I ask for. And she's like this in every class. I have good students in my school, really good students, affluent district, but this girl absolutely takes the cake. Helps teach a student at another high school who is an extremely talented arts student. This kid has the ability to take something from concept to in front of you, in reality, in less than a few hours. He helped design and build an entire set for a play we did on a ridiculously small budget. What made him so smart is his ability to think through all of the logical steps of the process immediately. He figured out the potential problems before they happened and took steps to avoid them from the planning stages. To me, this is what makes someone an actual genius. The ability to understand and work through a problem quickly and effortlessly that most others struggle with. It is absolutely incredible just how wide the gap is between the lowest performer and the highest performer in a single classroom. I teach AP Physics among other things, and one of my students got finished with his work in 1/4 of the time through the class and gave everyone at his table the answers just so he could talk with his friends about the particularly relative nature of mathematics.
It was fantastic to see. At a table right next to his, I had a student ask me, "Why does NASA need money to build things if they're so important to build? Shouldn't they just build them?" Please support tracked learning. I mean, I think this kid just solved our national debt issue. We don't need to pay anyone. If the work is important, they'll do it. Not a genius per se, but I've had a few very gifted kids in my classes. Sometimes they're just naturally gifted, or their parents push them or support them outside of school. Some want to learn as many new skills as possible and absorb all the information you give them. They can be left to work on something as long as it interests them. Others know they're capable of doing very well, but they don't care and slack off a bit because they know they can. It's very difficult to motivate these students sometimes. Sometimes they get bored by the work or don't want to write the reports that go with it. This can sometimes be a problem because most pieces of coursework require certain things which must be in it to receive a good grade, and they question the need for it. One very, very gifted girl I taught was an absolute pleasure to have in class. I remember doing a couple of things on the Nepal earthquakes when they happened last year. I was a geography teacher, and she wrote an absolutely outstanding essay on the impacts and everything, comparing it to some other examples, things like that. I think what really helped her to do so well was the fact that her parents were very, very supportive and nice people, also intelligent, and they kept just enough pressure on her to do well without being helicopter parents. She had a really positive attitude to school and academia in general and could see the value of everything she learned. I spoke to her English teacher after getting this incredible essay, and she said she was writing at a similar level then. By the way, she was 11 and writing at the sort of level and detail I'd expect from my 17 to 18-year-olds. Apparently, she read a lot of books and was always just interested. Brilliant stuff. I actually learnt stuff from her on occasion, which was amazing and always made me smile. Anyway, I showed this essay to a member of senior management who thought after seeing it, it was plagiarism, but she wrote it there in front of me. I miss teaching when I think back to pupils like her. I think the most interesting kid I ever taught was during my teaching practice. He was a 14-year-old kid called David, not especially interested in school, preferring to be outside messing with his mates or playing football, but he had the most interesting style of writing I've ever come across. So articulate and mature, yet with a quirky, humorous edge to it that showed a real independence of thought. I loved reading his work. It's been 10 years since I taught him, and I've yet to come across another pupil of his quality. I only taught him for a few months before I moved to a different placement, but I did take him aside before I left to tell him that I thought he had a real talent he could pursue. There was something innate with him, a real natural flair and talent. Others have achieved great success through pure hard work and determination, but I wouldn't class them as geniuses. I think I'm going to echo the sentiment of many of the other commenters that I read while getting through these stories now. This is a slightly demoralizing read to some of us who didn't come out of the womb with a brain firing on all cylinders with talent in all subjects. Oh well. I don't know if I would say that she was a genius, but there is one student I always think about. This was at a school that is known for having some of the smartest students around, at least in the on-paper sense, that they had great grades and test scores. And this was a class that attracted a lot of the highest achievers, read pre-med requirement. She had the highest average for all of the regular graded work, labs, problem sets, exams, but there's only so far you can stand apart from the others with those, particularly at a school like that. What allowed me to be completely blown away by her was her research papers. This was one of those core courses that had multiple professors, so he had to standardize the material, and there was a standard rubric for how the students were supposed to write the research papers. What essential questions they should be answering along the way, how to do the primary literature research, and how to cite your sources. The papers I got almost always fell into one of two categories: the C or below papers and the A papers. The C papers were from the students who, for some reason, didn't really get it with the rubric and still wrote it like it was a high school paper where they were obviously just rewording what they read on Wikipedia, plus some light cut-and-paste plagiarism from the abstracts of papers they clearly never read, and not enough citations. The A papers were from students who simply followed the rubric to the letter. They answered every question in the paper consecutively as it was written in the rubric, cited their sources, always reading and using just enough papers to be sufficient and no more, with the occasional sprinkling of the subtle cut-and-paste plagiarism. These papers were usually dull as crap, but often never had so much as a typo, so I pretty much had to give them an A because they did what I asked them to do. I never liked including the research papers in this course because the students were clearly not mature enough to really tackle the material in a productive way. They were fine freshman papers, but a waste of everyone's time in the end. Then, one day, I had this student in my class. She never followed the rubric and its dopey questions at all.
She thought of her own questions for the topic, the ones that were the most interesting and relevant to that topic specifically. Many of these questions were truly insightful and open-ended as well. She went into the literature and really read and clearly understood these papers that should have been way over the head of any normal teenager college student. Then, on top of that, she would obtain the data from these papers and run her own different analyses using very complex methodologies that I didn't teach until the most advanced courses for seniors and graduate students. So she was clearly just teaching herself as she went along. Lastly, she was a terrific writer, maybe one of the best I've ever read. Her papers always came in way too long for the limit. Normally a sign the paper was an editing nightmare, and I loved reading them. She knew how long the paper needed to be to cover the topic, and my limits were just suggestions she chose to ignore, and rightfully so. She is the type of student I think should get an A, not the other I dotters and T crosses, but alas, in the world of grade inflation, about 25% of my students always got A's. I've had a lot of really smart students, but never had another one like her. I love students like that. I teach an honors class, and the kids are so set on following a rubric to the letter that I love to set them up with an intentionally vague assignment in order to spur creativity. For example, to demonstrate that they understand the thematic elements of the literary movement for transcendentalism, I gave them the assignment, represent transcendentalism in another medium. So I actually got projects like a stop-motion video, a fake Tumblr, a children's book, a memory box, paintings, photography, etc. Honors kids tend to get the concepts quicker, but show reluctance if not given explicit instructions. I force them to be more interpretive. I had a student last fall in an Introduction to American Politics course, who was a computer science major taking the course as an elective. This kid absorbed information like a sponge and performed better on exams and essays than any of the political science majors. He would often drop by my office just to chat about politics and statistical programming. He eventually stopped coming to classes many days because I had to dumb down all the material so much for the other students. He still passed with flying colors and had a higher average than anyone else in the class, and eventually started a double major in political science and computer science. Students like that make the job worth the effort. My point here was that not only one single student makes the job worth the while, actually teaching is only 1/3 of my job, in addition to helping advise students and conducting my own research. I devote my position as a professor to all of my students individually, if they're willing to accept that attention. Many students refuse to come to class, complete assignments, study for exams, or show up at all during office hours. This is unfortunate for those students, and if I just described you, then you need to get off Reddit and read a fricking book. The truth is, I love my job very much. If I didn't, I would quit. Simple as that. I came for the story of a genius. I stayed for the repressed, salty rant of a college professor. Fun to get insight into the mind of one of our higher education authority figures. I did, however, it's a bit of a sad story. I worked at a special school for you people labeled as emotionally disturbed. One of my students would finish assignments in under 10 minutes. I would try to differentiate for him, but I'll be honest that I was a new teacher and not very good at it, combined with the fact that I was teaching 5 subjects and dealing with a variety of classroom challenges. Logically, his response was, "Why do I have to do more work just because I'm smart?" He had a fair point, and I couldn't see me forcing him to complete work that probably didn't challenge him anyway. So I let him play RuneScape. Now before you get pitchforks out, let me explain my logic. I, a bit of a nerd myself, understood the mental exercise of contemplating the most efficient or effective means of doing something in a video game, and although I never played RuneScape, figured it offered him an outlet to do something similar. Unfortunately, being a genius isn't all fun and games. Intellectual theorists say the further your IQ is from the norm of 100, the harder time you have relating to the masses. As I mentioned before, I was at a special school. This young man struggled with peer relations and had a crippling anxiety that often manifested in self-harm. He would beat his head on his desk, punch himself, slam his face into the corner of metal filing cabinets, etc. If we were lucky, he would just crawl under a desk and cry and cry. My heart went out to him, as I know sometimes thinking of my future and the world around me can turn into a grim task. I can only imagine how it looked to a young boy placed in a special ed setting when his mind was left to wander. I know my colleagues may disagree, but I still feel RuneScape was therapy. I've had some smart kids, so smart that others think they're a genius, but for me, they're just really clever. That being said, there was this one kid. Not that bright, but he did this one thing that had genius written all over it. I sat there talking him through some trig. Got to the point where it was something like tan 65 and I thought, damn, I forgot to grab a calculator. What did he do? He told me it to the nearest whole number.
I was shocked and thought it was a fluke. I gave him another and guess what? He got that right too. He wasn't the brightest kid, but he knew his trig ratios. A kid in Standard Algebra 2 who never did a lick of homework but made hundreds on every test. I talked to him and he said he didn't see the point in wasting his time in homework when he already knew how to do the problems. A month or two into the year, I told him I'd just make his test average his grade. I also had a talk with him to say that sometimes in life you can cut to the chase when you know your stuff, but sometimes you still have to jump through hoops that seem stupid even when you don't see the point, and even when there might not be a point. To those saying that's a bad thing to say to an intelligent kid, try starting a business or patenting your game-changing invention without getting the proper government permits, etc. That even though I'm giving him a break, sometimes you have to do your homework, even when it seems unnecessary. As an aside, I later taught information technology, and I told the kids that if they earned their industry certification at the end of the year, A+ or Microsoft Technology Associate, depending on grade level, I'd change their grades so they got an A for the year. Because earning the certification proves mastery of the concepts I was teaching. Had a 70 to 80% pass rate, and I really think this policy had something to do with that. It motivated the kids to work hard, and I almost never had to change a grade. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.